I met Ryan at a professional development course for nurses. He stayed behind one evening to help me fix a glitchy PowerPoint presentation. We laughed about the ridiculous font someone had chosen, sipping bad coffee from the vending machine until the parking lot emptied out. His wedding ring caught the light a few times, but he wore it like it was just another piece of jewelry, not a real barrier. At first, it was harmless flirting, quick smiles between sessions, casual texts about work stuff. Within weeks, it became dinners at out-of-the-way diners, where no one we knew would walk in. His white Camry would always be a few cars back when we left separately, but it was there. A little flicker in my mirror reminding me that this wasn't supposed to be happening. I told myself I was in control. I lived alone in a tiny studio, working crazy shifts, nobody really asking questions about my personal life. His contact name was just Mike in my phone. His ring wasn't a threat anymore. It felt like something that belonged to a different world. I'd fall asleep with the whir of my old air conditioner drowning out everything, believing I was handling it. We kept it simple. Quick meetings. No drama. I avoided thinking about how easy it would be for things to get complicated. When I let myself dream, I imagined sleepy mornings with mugs of tea, not locked glances across hospital corridors. Everything stayed light, safe. No promises, no plans. Just this bubble we made. 3 months into whatever it was we had, I found a red sticker tucked under my windshield wiper when I came home from a late shift. It was a small square with the word "Home Wrecker" printed in bold letters. 2 long scratches ran down the side of my car, deep enough that I could catch the edges with my fingernail. My stomach dropped, but I tried to shake it off. Kids messing around, I told myself. My building wasn't exactly in the best part of town. It could have been anyone. Still, the timing made my skin crawl. I snapped a photo, sent it to Ryan. He called almost immediately. "Jesus," he said. "Someone must have mixed up your car with somebody else's. I'll cover the repairs." He sounded pissed off but calm. His voice settled me a little. I wanted to believe him, so I did. I scheduled a body shop appointment and moved on, at least outwardly. A week later, I got a text from an unknown number. No greeting, no signature. Just 6 words. "I know your apartment number." I stood frozen in the middle of my kitchen, phone buzzing in my hand. I reread the message 3 times before locking the door, pulling all the curtains even though it was still bright outside. I kept the lights low that night and checked every shadow that moved across the narrow slice of window. Every footstep in the hallway sounded sharper. The next few nights, the same number or ones just like it would call. Never more than 1 word before the line went dead. "Shame," a woman's voice whispered once before the call cut. I started sleeping with my keys and pepper spray on the nightstand. Walking to the trash bins at the end of the driveway felt like a tactical mission. My heart beat faster every time a car slowed down near the curb. I switched my route to work, parked in different spots. Nothing made a difference. I shoved the pepper spray into my pocket even for the 10 steps to the dumpster. Late one evening after my shift, the light in the stairwell flickered and then went out. The steps sank into shadows, making every movement feel like it was happening in slow motion. As I reached the last flight, I heard someone's footsteps creak behind me. I turned quickly, but when I looked, the hallway was empty. My pulse raced, but I told myself it was nothing. I unlocked my door, stepping inside just as my phone buzzed. The screen said, "Unknown." I hesitated before answering. The voice on the other end was low and raspy, almost a whisper. "Look behind you." I froze. Slowly, I turned, and through the peephole, I saw a woman in a raincoat. Her hood covered her face completely, but I could feel her staring through the door. She didn't say anything, just stood there for a moment before turning and leaving. On my doormat was a medical mask, its fabric dirty, with the words, "He's not yours," scrawled across it. My hands shook as I picked it up. I could hear my upstairs neighbors slam their door, and I almost screamed. The sudden noise only deepened the silence that had already sunk into my chest, an unwelcome guest that refused to leave. The next morning, I met Ryan at a greasy diner near a car wash. He looked exhausted, his usual confident demeanor nowhere to be found. He slid into the booth across from me, and after a long pause, he started talking. He told me his wife had found a motel receipt, one that led her to my address. She threatened to destroy both of us if he left her, promising to ruin our reputations. He begged me to give him time to finalize the divorce and promised that he loved me. I sat there watching him, but my mind kept drifting to the figure outside the window. She was standing by a red pickup truck, holding a phone and pointing it right at us. Her smile was thin, calculating, like she had already won. Ryan's words seemed to fade into the background, like the dull hum of the diner's neon sign. All I could hear was the soft jingle of the bell above the door as someone walked in. I felt my stomach drop. A week later, I moved out. I changed my number and bought a used Honda Fit. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was always watching me. In my new place, I hoped the fresh start would help. But as I got into my car the next morning, I saw it again. A new sticker under the windshield wiper. This one said, "You can't hide." My chest tightened. I stopped answering unknown calls and parked only under security cameras. Ryan left me a voicemail saying they were seeing a family therapist now. I deleted it without listening to the rest. Every time I hear someone cough in the hallway or a car pull up outside, I feel the familiar pang of fear. I tell myself it's over, that I'm free. But deep down, I know the worst part wasn't the betrayal or the threats. It was the fact that no matter where I go, no matter how much I try to move on, the fear will always be there, lingering in the background, never truly gone. The quiet hum of jealousy, the kind that travels miles, never leaves. I've learned to watch for the quick steps behind me, the shadow that never seems to fade. I've learned that this story didn't end in tragedy. It ended in the constant, suffocating anticipation of the next scratch, the next whisper, the next message that always seems to find me. The night air was cold enough to slice through the layers of my suit, but I barely felt it. Music thundered from the rooftop speakers, drowning out the late-night hush of the city below. Glass towers blinked around us, reflections dancing on the slick surfaces like nervous fireflies. Someone handed me a drink, bourbon, warm and sharp, and I tipped it back without thinking. The party wasn't slowing down. If anything, it was getting messier. People laughed too loudly, stumbled over each other, clinking their glasses to a future none of us could really see. Sometime around 3 in the morning, the rooftop started to empty. I don't remember leaving. 1 second I was standing by the railing with a cigarette in my hand. The next I was in the back seat of a cab, Ava from marketing next to me. Her lipstick was smudged, and she smelled like vanilla and smoke. The driver didn't say a word as the city lights dragged across the windows. Neither did we. When we stopped outside her building, we sat there too long, the meter ticking. I should have let her go alone. Instead, I followed her inside. The morning was brutal. Lights scraped across the sky, pale and merciless. I woke up feeling like my head was packed with broken glass. Ava was already gone. I found a note on the counter that said, "Take care." I didn't. I stumbled back into a cab, face burning even though no one was looking. That icy morning, standing outside my house with my keys shaking in my hand, I decided to leave everything right there. The guilt, the shame, the whole night. Same way I left the bloated bar tab at the club without a second thought. We agreed, without saying much, to forget it happened. Ava switched departments a few weeks later. We nodded in meetings like nothing had changed. At home, I focused on keeping things simple. Work, home, grocery runs, weekend soccer games with my kid. I helped him build a solar system model for his school project. We picked out foam balls and glow-in-the-dark paint from the craft store. At night, I sat on the couch next to Lena, scrolling mindlessly while she caught up on her shows. The weight of my wedding ring pressed a little harder against my finger, but it stayed on. After a while, I really thought it was buried. One stupid night, swallowed up by a busy life. I believed it for almost 2 months. The first message came out of nowhere. I was at work, shuffling through a boring spreadsheet when my phone buzzed. I glanced down without thinking, expecting another calendar reminder. Instead, it was a picture. Grainy, low light, but clear enough. Me and Ava. In the cab. Her head against my shoulder. My hand on her knee. Below it, just a few words. 15,000 by Friday, or your wife gets the photo. I stared at the screen for too long, not even breathing. Then I swiped it away, heart hammering. I deleted the chat immediately, fingers clumsy and cold. For a second, I convinced myself it was a prank, some awful joke. But when I opened my personal phone later, the photo was already there too, sitting in the gallery like it had been waiting all day. No trace of who sent it. Just a random username made of numbers and letters. The next few days blurred together. I couldn't focus on anything. I kept checking my phone every few minutes, pretending to read emails, pretending to care about meetings. Every time a notification popped up, my stomach dropped through the floor. I barely slept. I started keeping my phone under my pillow at night, clutching it like it was some kind of lifeline. Lena noticed I was jumpy, but I brushed it off, blaming work stress. She bought me those herbal teas that are supposed to help you sleep. I poured them down the sink when she wasn't looking. The house felt different, heavier. Even stupid things seemed threatening. The hum of the fridge felt too loud when I crept into the kitchen at 3 a.m. The windows rattled when the wind picked up, and it sounded like someone trying the locks. I lay awake, watching the hallway, listening for footsteps that never came. The worst part wasn't the fear of being hurt. It was the fear of losing everything. One picture. That's all it would take to blow it all apart. I waited for the next message, knowing it would come. I didn't know why I agreed to do it. But the message kept haunting me, and the fear of it getting worse was stronger than anything else. I transferred the 15,000 into Bitcoin. My hands were shaking as I hit the confirm button, watching the money disappear from my account. There was no turning back now. Almost immediately, the phone buzzed again. The message was short, to the point. Thanks, but I have more pictures. It's going to cost you another 10K if you want them kept hidden. I froze, staring at the screen. The pit in my stomach opened wide, and the cold spread through me. It was like the floor had just slipped away, and I was free-falling. I tried to focus, to breathe, but nothing seemed real. Around me, colleagues were discussing the latest project, oblivious to what was happening in my head. I sat there, nodding occasionally, while my mind spiraled. I had to find a way to track this guy down. I Googled everything, searching for ways to trace an IP address. Every day, the amounts on my credit card grew. It was like I was sinking deeper into quicksand, and the more I struggled, the faster I sank. The weight of it all pressed against my chest. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't think straight. Lena started to notice. I wasn't good at hiding it anymore. My hands were always trembling, and I couldn't look her in the eye without feeling like I was choking. I told her it was work stress, but I knew she wasn't buying it. Every night, I waited for the next message, and when it came, it was worse. I understood now. There would never be enough money to make this go away. A few days later, the text arrived. A meeting place. A bar by the old train station. I knew exactly where it was. The old streets, the dim lights, the air thick with diesel fumes. I couldn't even remember how I got there, but somehow I was standing by the corner of the building, watching the streetlight flicker. My stomach twisted in on itself. I stood there for what felt like forever. And then I saw him. He was leaning against the side of a rusted container, wrapped in a scarf, his face obscured. He stepped forward when I approached. His eyes were hidden, but his posture was cold, calculated. He didn't speak immediately. He just held his hand out, counting the money I handed him. I watched him count, my breath quickening as I waited for the inevitable. Finally, he looked up at me and said, "5,000 more in 2 weeks, or the photos go to her." I could feel the blood draining from my face. It was like I couldn't breathe. I had to get out of there. I slammed my hand down on the steering wheel when I was back in the car, the horn blaring, echoing under the bridge. The adrenaline was a pounding rhythm in my chest, but it didn't give me relief. It only made the terror worse. The thought of telling Lena crossed my mind for the first time. For a split second, it seemed easier than handing over more money. Maybe she could help me fix it, but I couldn't shake the weight of the secret. The deeper I went, the harder it was to get out. I realized I was caught in a spiral, unable to stop the fall. I had to make it end, or it would never stop. The next morning, I asked Lena if we could talk. She was getting the kids ready for school, looking over the breakfast table, and I almost backed out. But the words came out anyway, raw and desperate. I told her everything, stumbling over my words, unable to meet her eyes. I couldn't stop the shaking in my hands, couldn't stop the panic crawling up my throat. She didn't say anything for what felt like an eternity. Finally, she put down her coffee mug, her fingers tight around it. The silence between us felt suffocating. The only sound was the neighbor's dog barking in the yard next door. Her voice broke through the tension. "I hate lying," she said, her tone low. "But you know what I hate more? People who try to control us with threats." Her eyes were cold, but her decision was clear. "We're going to the police." At noon, we walked into the police station, and I handed over the printouts of every message, every photo, and every transaction. The weight that had been crushing me for so long lifted, just a little. I felt a small breath of relief, like the first bit of air after holding my head underwater. We sat there in the waiting room while the officer reviewed everything, and for the first time in months, I felt like I might actually be able to breathe again. The shakedown stopped after that. The messages stopped. The calls stopped. The shadow that had been hanging over me slowly disappeared. The police were able to track the guy down, and he didn't make it far. But even now, every time my phone buzzes, I feel that familiar tension in my chest. That moment of panic. The mistake is always there, just beneath the surface, waiting to remind me how much it cost, how much I lost. We got married 7 years ago, not long after we met working shifts at a campus cafe. It wasn't anything fancy, grinding cheap coffee, wiping sticky tables, but he always made it better, cracking dry jokes while stacking chairs. After graduation, he went into contracting, always had a tape measure clipped to his belt like it was part of him. I found remote sales work. It was perfect, honestly. Some mornings, I'd be pitching clients while sitting cross-legged in my pajamas, second cup of coffee in hand, the dog snoring on the couch behind me. Tuesdays were laundry days. Fridays were for takeout, usually Thai because he liked the spicy noodles, and I liked how easy it was. The rhythm was easy, natural. We didn't have a fancy life, but it was ours. Even arguments were small. Dumb things like who left the fridge door open or whether we needed a new rug for the living room. Then my company sent me to a conference in Chicago. 4 nights, 3 days, endless panels about market trends and digital outreach strategies. I didn't even want to go, but the boss insisted. I packed light. Jeans, work tops, one decent dress just in case. Colin was on the second panel I attended. He asked a question during the Q&A, and when I turned around, he winked. Afterward, in the hotel bar, he bought me a glass of wine. It wasn't anything crazy. Conference flirting, harmless. At least that's what I told myself at first. We took a bunch of stupid selfies, laughing too loud. When he leaned in close, I didn't move away. It wasn't a kiss, exactly. It was more like we crossed some invisible line without meaning to. Walking back to my room that night, the air felt different. Heavy. I kept whispering. Nothing happened. Nothing happened. Like saying it could make it true. I slept badly. Kept checking my phone for no reason. In the morning, Colin waved to me in the lobby. Casual, like nothing was weird. And I smiled too big. Too fast. The flight home felt longer than it should have. I stared at my boarding pass so long the ink seemed to blur. When I stepped back into our house, suitcase banging my leg, he kissed me like he hadn't seen me in a year. I hugged him too tightly, squeezing the lie between us. I promised myself it ended at the gate, vanished with the boarding pass. Like trash thrown away before anyone noticed. The next Sunday, he brought home fresh strawberries. He placed them on the counter like a prize. "You said you missed good strawberries," he said, even though I didn't remember mentioning it. That night he asked if my new scarf was warm enough. I hadn't worn it around him before. I laughed it off, said, "Yeah, it's perfect," even though something about the way he looked at me made my skin crawl, like he was measuring something I couldn't see. I started noticing small things. He would get up in the middle of the night and walk around the house, not going anywhere, not doing anything, just standing in the hallway, stopping by the window, staring out into the dark. I asked him once if everything was okay. He shrugged. "Just checking," he said. No smile, no joke. I told myself it was my imagination. That the stress from the trip hadn't worn off yet. That I was reading into things. But it got worse. His looks became sharper, longer. Like he was scanning for a crack in the wall, a soft spot. He wasn't angry. He wasn't even cold. He was just waiting. Like he knew something was wrong and was giving me time to admit it. I tried to bury it. I made sure Tuesdays were still laundry days. Friday nights, I ordered Thai food like clockwork. I smiled. I laughed. I kissed him when he came home with dirt on his jeans from a job site. But under it all, there was this current, buzzing just under the surface. The little things started getting louder. The kitchen clock seemed to tick more harshly, like it was counting down. I noticed dust on the bookshelves that I never used to care about. The house smelled different, sharper, like the air before a thunderstorm. It was like all the things we didn't say had filled the rooms, soaking into the walls. One night, I came into the kitchen to find him just standing there, barefoot on the tile, staring at the table. He didn't move when I walked in. Didn't say anything. I opened the fridge like normal, grabbed a bottle of water, heart hammering. When I turned back around, he was still staring. Not at me. Past me. Through me. I wanted to say something. Anything. Joke, laugh, shake off the tension. But when I opened my mouth, nothing came out. So I just twisted off the bottle cap and drank, feeling the cold water burn all the way down. He finally blinked, looked at me, and without a word, turned and walked upstairs. I stayed in the kitchen a long time, listening to the creak of the floorboards overhead, the ticking of the clock, the slow, steady hum of the refrigerator. The air felt thick, like it was pressing down on me. I wiped the counters even though they were already clean, rearranged the salt and pepper shakers, checked the lock on the back door twice. When I finally went upstairs, I paused on the landing. The hallway was dark except for a sliver of light coming from our bedroom door, cracked open just an inch. I could hear him breathing inside, slow and even. But still, I waited there, one foot on the top step, one on the landing, staring at that thin line of light. That evening, he brought me hot chocolate, just like in the first year of our marriage. It was so out of place, so gentle, like nothing had changed. I barely managed a smile, and he handed me the cup, his gaze fixed on me, too steady. Then, as though it were nothing, he said, "Colin." My blood froze. The cup in my hand trembled. I set it down slowly, watching the steam curl up, my mind racing. He placed a bundle of keys on the table. For a moment, it felt like the world had shifted out of its usual place. He walked over to the door, closed it, and locked it. The sound of the new lock clicking echoed through the room. He turned back, eyes still on me, and slipped the keys into his pocket. "I think we need to talk," he said, voice calm, but the air around him felt thick. Without distractions. My breath caught in my throat. The room felt smaller. The kitchen, once a comforting space, now seemed suffocating. My phone sat on the kitchen island, just out of reach, as if it belonged to someone else's life. I felt like I couldn't move, like I was stuck, caught in a moment that I couldn't escape. The walls closed in on me. The weight of his gaze anchored me in place. He didn't need to raise his voice. His presence, his silence, was enough to make every breath feel like a weight. The night stretched on, a silent tension filling every inch of the house. He sat in the armchair, his eyes fixed on me, studying every movement I made. I could feel the weight of his stare even when I didn't look at him. It was like being under a microscope, every gesture scrutinized, every movement too noticeable. I tried to slip into the bedroom, hoping I could find a way to breathe without him watching me. But as soon as I stood up, he followed. His footsteps were quiet, but they were there, constant, unrelenting. The refrigerator hummed too loudly, and I couldn't shake the feeling that even it was holding its breath, afraid of making a sound. The silence was so thick, it felt like it had substance. Even the window in the bathroom, once cracked open slightly for air, was sealed shut now, the edges filled with thick, black sealant. It wasn't just an inconvenience. It was a barrier. He talked about a vacation, about taking some time off to work on our trust. His words slow and measured. Each one seemed to stretch out into eternity. My head spun, and I felt a rising panic. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Every word from his mouth seemed to sink deeper into my chest, wrapping tighter around my lungs. The more he talked, the less I felt like I was in control. By the time dawn was nearing, I realized he had fallen asleep in the chair. I couldn't say if he had been watching me until then, but I couldn't take it anymore. I lay in bed, listening to his soft breathing, counting the minutes. I heard the creak of the floorboards and the faintest click of the door when he had locked it. But it was the silence that remained the loudest. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, my mind a chaotic blur. But still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was going to break. I didn't know how long I stayed like that, staring into the dark, but the first light of dawn gave me a chance. The house was still. The air felt too still, too quiet. All the doors were locked, but I knew the basement window still opened outward. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed a screwdriver from the kitchen drawer and pried the screws out of the window grate, the metal scraping loudly. My hands were shaking, but I kept going. One screw at a time, until the grate fell loose. My pajamas tore as I squeezed through the narrow opening, but I didn't care. The cold air hit me hard, but it didn't matter. The tightness in my chest had loosened the moment I stepped out of the house. I crawled through the narrow space, my breath coming in short gasps, until I finally stood on the other side, free. I hurried to the neighbor's house, my heart pounding in my ears. I knocked on the door, frantic. They answered quickly, their faces a mix of concern and confusion. "Call the police," I whispered, as they opened the door wider, letting me in. I looked back toward my house. In the faint morning light, I could see the silhouette of him standing at the window. It wasn't just that he was there. It was the way he stood. Still. Watching. Like a predator waiting for the right moment to pounce. I heard the click of the lock from the house. A sound so final, so certain. It was the sound of a cage closing, and I wasn't sure if it was me or him who was trapped. As I stood in the neighbor's living room, watching the house, the police were on their way. My body trembled, but not from the cold. The chain that had held me in place had already left its mark. The conversation about trust could wait. I knew what had happened now. I knew where we were headed. Darcy laughed at the way I slouched while I was trying to deadlift. She mimicked me right there in the gym, standing next to the weight rack, hunched over and making a face like an old man. I tried to defend myself, but she just kept laughing, light and quick, and for the first time in a while, I didn't mind being the butt of a joke. A couple of weeks later, we were sitting together in this little cafe that stayed open late, sipping smoothies under this flickering pink neon light that made everything look a little too fake, like a movie set. She wore this thin gold ring on her right hand that caught the light every time she moved. But when she started talking about some indie band she loved, I forgot to care if it meant anything. At that time, I lived in this loft right above an old auto repair shop on the edge of town. The paint peeled off the walls and the place smelled faintly like oil no matter how many candles I lit. But nobody cared if you brought people over late at night. That was part of the appeal. Most days, my phone would light up with Darcy's texts, little jokes, plans, random songs she thought I'd like. It gave everything a sharper edge, like the boring parts of life didn't feel so heavy anymore. One night, she texted, "Come over. Husband's away for a work trip." It was raining hard when I pulled into her driveway, the kind of rain that smacks the windshield so fast the wipers can't keep up. Her place was one of those suburban houses that all looked the same in the dark. But the porch light was on, and the windows glowed a soft yellow like she was expecting me. I jogged to the door, my jacket already soaked through, and she pulled me inside with a grin. Inside, the place smelled like baked cheese and garlic, heavy and warm. Some slow music played low from a speaker on the shelf, almost drowned out by the storm hammering the roof. Darcy had kicked off her shoes and pulled her hair up messily, like she didn't care how she looked. But she still looked better than most people when they tried. She tossed me a towel to dry off and led me into the living room where two big pizzas sat open on the coffee table. The doorbell rang, and it startled us both a little. She laughed it off and said, "That's just the delivery guy. I tipped him online." She went to grab the pizza from the guy, a kid wearing an oversized baseball cap so big it kept slipping down into his eyes. When she shut the door, we both started laughing. Darcy said, "Looks like he stole that hat from his dad." I cracked back, "Or his dad's dad." Stupid jokes, but they felt good. We sat back down, cross-legged on the carpet like kids at a sleepover, tossing slices back and forth and making up stories about the delivery guy's tragic baseball career. The storm outside wasn't letting up. Thunder rolled heavy across the house, rattling the windows a little. I started noticing how quiet everything else was, the kind of quiet that feels thick. At some point, Darcy's phone lit up on the table next to her. She glanced at it for a second but didn't pick it up. She just pressed the screen down, face down on the wood, and grabbed another slice of pizza. I didn't ask. It wasn't my business. We laughed a little more, but it was softer now, more tired maybe, or just pretending to ignore whatever was sitting there between us. The rain kept hammering down, and we both kept finding reasons not to move. Darcy fiddled with the corner of the pizza box. I tapped my fingers against my knee. Midnight was creeping up, and even though the lights inside made it feel like a bubble where nothing bad could reach us, I knew I should leave. I thought about how dumb it would look if anyone saw my car still in her driveway the next morning. But every time I half stood to say goodbye, Darcy would shift closer or brush her hand against mine, and I'd stay planted. Outside, the wind had picked up, pushing the rain sideways against the windows. It sounded different now. Less like regular rain, more like fists pounding against the house, fast and angry. I glanced at the clock on the wall, surprised at how late it had gotten. Somehow, time had turned from something friendly to something sharp, slicing through the comfort of the room. We didn't say much after that. The TV was on, muted, just cycling through some old movie neither of us was really watching. Every once in a while the screen would flicker, casting odd flashes across the room. The furniture looked unfamiliar in the shifting light. Without really thinking about it, I leaned over. Darcy looked at me for a second, like she was weighing something, and then closed the distance herself. We kissed, right there on the floor, with the pizza boxes half closed and the muted TV flickering blue and white over us. The door slammed so hard that the TV remote fell off the coffee table. I barely registered the sound before the front door swung open. Standing there in the frame, drenched and furious, was her husband. His jacket gleamed with rain, and his face was twisted with rage. I could see his hand shaking as he pulled out a gun. Everything around me went still, except for the sound of my pulse ringing in my ears. I could feel the cold metal of fear in my mouth. Darcy stood up quickly, hands raised, blocking me with her body. Her voice came out sharp, but all I heard was the pounding of blood in my head. The world seemed to close in on the barrel of the gun. I thought, "Get out. Get out now." For a long, drawn-out second, nobody moved. His eyes were locked on me, darting between me and Darcy, as if trying to decide what to do. I kept my hands up, my legs frozen, and I couldn't think of anything but the gun and the feeling that if I didn't leave now, there would be no leaving at all. I could hear my breathing, shallow and quick, and Darcy's soft voice, pleading, but I couldn't focus on what she was saying. All I saw was the shaking hand holding the gun. The air felt like it was pressing down on me, heavier than the rain beating against the windows. Then he stepped forward. The carpet rippled under his boots, and I stumbled back, my hands still up. Darcy was yelling now, but I couldn't make out the words. My mind was screaming, and instinct took over. I caught a glimpse of the door to the terrace behind them, half open, an escape route. Without thinking, I made a break for it. I dashed through the door, slipping on the wet floor as I hit the outside. The rain was a wall of water, soaking me instantly, but I kept running. The wooden boards on the terrace were slick, and my feet slipped a few times, but I kept pushing, jumping over the low fence at the end of the yard. As soon as I cleared it, I heard the sound of a dog barking loudly, then the crack of a car door slamming shut. The harsh beam of a flashlight sliced through the night, and I could hear footsteps, his footsteps, behind me. My heart was pounding, each beat as loud as thunder. I was running now, weaving through cars in the alley, trying to stay out of the light. My breath was coming in sharp gasps, but I didn't dare look back. I could hear him yelling now, but the distance between us was growing, and after what felt like forever, the sound of his footsteps faded into the night. I didn't stop until I was well into the next block, my lungs burning, my mind racing. I ducked into a narrow alley and crouched behind a dumpster, trying to catch my breath, wondering if he'd see me. But all I could hear was the rain, steady and heavy, and the sound of my heart, still thumping loudly in my chest. By the time I reached the edge of the city, I was drenched, shivering uncontrollably. My hands were shaking as I called for a cab, not even sure where I was going, just needing to get away. The driver took me to a small motel off the highway, and I didn't even bother to ask the name. I paid in cash, slipped into the room, and locked the door behind me. I collapsed onto the bed, still trembling, staring at the ceiling. I couldn't sleep. Not with the adrenaline still buzzing through me. Not with the thought of Darcy's husband somewhere out there, still furious, still looking for me. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I didn't want to look at it, but something made me check. It was Darcy. She had texted, "We need to stop." I stared at the message for a long time. My fingers hovered over the screen for a moment. Then I deleted her contact, pressing the delete button harder than necessary. The thought of what had just happened settled in slowly. The realization that whatever had started between us had ended in a mess I couldn't fix. I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to steady my breath. But even in the silence of the motel room, the sound of a car door slamming, just like it had earlier, echoed in my mind. A constant reminder. The gun hadn't fired, but the reflection of that cold, metallic barrel kept flashing in every mirror I passed. I couldn't escape it. The adventure that had seemed like a moment of excitement, a brief thrill, turned into something I'd never forget. I didn't know how long I'd be haunted by it, but I knew one thing for sure. I'd never look at Darcy the same way again. I passed by the gym every day after that, and without even realizing it, my shoulders would tense up, as if waiting for something, anything, to happen. That spark of desire, of reckless fun, had lasted a moment, but the fear, that lingered far longer. We met at a book club, arguing over Fitzgerald. It wasn't even a serious argument, more like two people stubborn about tiny things. He said Gatsby was a fool. I said he was a dreamer. After that, it was easy. Dinner dates, movie nights, moving in together in a small two-bedroom apartment with peeling paint and a view of the grocery store parking lot. Wednesday nights were for laundry. Friday nights, I baked pie. It became a rhythm, predictable, comforting. For a while, life moved in this small circle. He'd text me funny things from work. We'd argue over what movie to watch, fall asleep in a tangle of limbs. His alarm would go off at 6:30 sharp every morning. We were careful about bills, careful about grocery lists, careful about everything. But then, little by little, the pattern slipped. First, it was late nights. He'd text, "Big project, don't wait up." Then, it was the silenced phone, screen flashing briefly before he turned it face down. At first, I didn't think much. Work was busy. Deadlines, stress, all the usual excuses. But one night, getting into his car, I smelled something. Not his usual aftershave. Something sweeter, heavier, like a perfume I didn't own. I didn't say anything, just stared out the window and let the radio fill the silence. The next few weeks blurred. More late nights, more excuses. I noticed receipts stuffed into his jacket pocket when I did laundry, cafes and coffee shops we never visited, small places across town, not near his office. Once, a lipstick mark on a napkin crumpled in the back seat. Not red, something softer, like rose. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe coworkers, maybe meetings. I almost believed it. Friends started to notice. Over coffee, casual questions turned pointed. "Everything good with you two? You seem a little off." They suggested talking to him, being direct. But the idea of hearing something final froze me. So, instead, I checked the bank statement when he left his laptop open. Searched transactions, pieced together trails. Lunches, coffee runs, drinks, all away from work and none with me. The feeling grew, thick and heavy like storm clouds. By then, it wasn't about if something was wrong. It was how bad it was. Curiosity overran the fear. I needed to know. One Thursday, he came home early, changed out of his office clothes into jeans and a plain hoodie. I watched him from the kitchen, pretending to fuss with the dishes. He told me he had to meet with some contractors about a project site. Said it might run late. He kissed my temple without meeting my eyes. As soon as he pulled out of the driveway, I grabbed the keys. Took the old Outback he never bothered to notice much. Stayed a few cars behind, careful at stoplights. He didn't drive toward downtown like he said he would. Instead, he took the highway out toward the industrial area. Not many people around there after dark. Mostly warehouses, a few old bars and diners barely holding on. He pulled into a cracked parking lot behind a dive bar with flickering neon signs. I slowed, heart hammering, and parked a little ways back, half hidden behind an abandoned delivery van. I could see him clearly. He got out of the car, glanced around once, then walked toward the entrance. A woman was waiting under the awning. Even from a distance, her bright yellow raincoat stood out like a warning flag. She waved when she saw him. He smiled, a quick, easy smile I hadn't seen directed at me in months. They met halfway, hugged briefly. It was nothing, barely a second. But it was enough. The world cracked open like thin ice. My fingers clenched the steering wheel so hard it hurt. For a minute, I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The car windows fogged up from my breath. I wiped at them blindly, heart banging against my ribs. The woman laughed at something he said. I could see the flash of her teeth even from here. Without thinking, I opened the door. The slam echoed across the empty lot louder than I meant. They both turned instantly. His body stiffened, head snapping toward me. His face drained of color, mouth tightening into a hard line. He said something to the woman I couldn't hear and started walking fast toward me. His steps were sharp, deliberate, cutting across the broken asphalt. He grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into my skin like claws. His voice was low, dangerous, like he was trying to swallow the anger. "You've been following me?" he hissed. I opened my mouth to explain, but the words were drowned out by the distant rumble of a passing train. I could hear the screech of the metal wheels, the blare of the horn. He shoved me toward the car, his grip tightening, and hissed through clenched teeth, "Get in." I stumbled, trying to regain my balance, but I got in. I didn't protest. He slammed the door shut and started the engine, the growl of the car almost matching the tension in the air. The drive back was silent, too silent, the space between us thick with the unspoken. The headlights barely cut through the dark. The pavement stretched endlessly in front of us, but it felt like time had stopped. The garage door clanged shut behind us with an unsettling finality. He locked the chain across it, a chain that had never been there before. He hadn't even asked. It was just done. I froze, my hand still on the door handle, and watched him. He moved with the same cold precision as he always did, but now it was different. Now, I was scared. He stepped into the house ahead of me, flicking the switch for the living room light. The TV buzzed quietly in the corner, the picture flickering like it had a life of its own, but no one was watching. He stood in the middle of the room, his chest rising and falling with every shallow breath. He didn't look at me. His eyes were cold, distant, like he wasn't even seeing me anymore. "This is my life," he said, his voice flat. "My business. You don't get to mess with it." His words were like a slap, but the real sting was the cold realization that I didn't know this man anymore. The person standing in front of me wasn't the man I'd met at that book club, the one I argued about Fitzgerald with. The man before me was a stranger, someone who had quietly taken over my life, my house, my world. And I didn't know how to make him leave. I stood there, not knowing what to say, my thoughts frozen in place. His life, his business. That's what he kept repeating, as though he had every right to decide everything. And maybe he did. Maybe he had already decided. He turned away, leaving me standing in the silence of the room, the hum of the TV the only sound. The air felt thick, oppressive, suffocating. He stood there, his breath ragged, but his words were even sharper. His voice, so cold, pierced through the stillness like ice. "Don't do this. Don't act like you're some innocent victim in all of this." His words stung more than I thought possible. The venom in his voice seemed to freeze everything around us. I opened my mouth to respond, but the words caught in my throat. I couldn't even argue. He picked up his phone from the couch, carelessly tossing it onto the cushion, the screen still lit up. I saw it. My recent search history. The cafes, the locations, the places I had tried to track. His eyes flickered to the phone, then back at me. It was as if the phone was a weapon now, a tool to remind me of my place. "You've been spying on me," he said. It wasn't a question. It was a declaration, a warning. I stared at the phone, the screen flashing with the names of places I never went, things I never knew. A sick feeling bubbled up inside me. He wasn't just angry. He was in control, and I was the one in the wrong here. He turned on his heel and walked out of the room, his footsteps loud against the hardwood floor. The door slammed behind him. I stood there, the weight of everything crushing down on me. There was no escape from this. Not anymore. The days stretched out, each one blending into the next. We had become actors in a play we both knew the script to but didn't want to perform. He left every evening, just like he always did. Always returned on time, always too calm. Every night, I stayed up waiting, pretending to sleep while my mind raced. The house felt smaller. The walls seemed to close in, the air thickening with the constant tension. His movements became routine, calculated. The conversations we had, if they could be called that, were short and sharp. His eyes never softened anymore. He didn't look at me like he used to. I locked the car, locked the phone, locked everything I could. I was becoming a prisoner in my own home. Not because he was there, but because I had started locking myself in. The fear was a constant weight on my shoulders. I had never known fear like this, the kind that gripped you silently, that seeped into your bones and didn't let go. But still, I smiled at the neighbors. I said hi when I saw people in the yard. I talked about the weather, about the flowers blooming, about things that felt like they mattered. The lie was getting easier to tell, because no one asked the questions I was terrified of answering. At night, when I heard his soft voice on the phone in the backyard, I stayed still. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe too loudly. The conversation was always hushed, always careful. Sometimes, I wondered who he was talking to, but I never asked. The fear of knowing was too much. I didn't follow him anymore. Not physically anyway. But I knew. I knew what was happening, and I was learning to ignore it, learning to step softly around it. Because every day, I felt the ice cracking beneath me. And if I wasn't careful, it would break under us both. And so, I kept my balance. Slowly. Carefully. Because sometimes, not knowing was safer than knowing too much. It started out as a joke. We met through a conference app. I barely even registered her name the first time she messaged me. Just remembered she sent a dumb meme about synergy or some other corporate buzzword. I laughed because, yeah, it was stupid, but also dead on. She kept messaging, snarky little comments during the video panels, sarcastic observations about the fake smiles and endless jargon. It felt harmless. I'd been married 12 years, had 2 kids. Stuff like this wasn't supposed to matter to me. But the way she made the hours fly by, it messed with my head more than I admitted. 3 weeks. That's how long it stayed virtual. At first, I told myself it was just funny texts. Then she suggested lunch. Nothing fancy. Some greasy burger joint halfway between our offices. I said yes without thinking too hard about it. Just burgers, right? We joked, we ate, we left. No harm. I promised myself that was it. A little crack in the wall, sure, but manageable. It wasn't. She messaged the same night, said she had a good time. Asked if I wanted to meet again, somewhere a little quieter. I waited a day to reply. Told myself that hesitation was a sign I had control. Then I said yes anyway. We drove an hour out of the city to some diner nobody would recognize. I told my wife it was a late meeting, even made a fake calendar invite to back it up. After that, it got easier. I told myself after every meeting that it was the last one. Every time it felt true when I thought it. I'd look at myself in the bathroom mirror, swear it was over, mean it down to my bones. But then she'd send some inside joke, or a stupid photo of the world's worst salad she found at lunch, and I'd start smiling like an idiot. That newness pulled at me, strong and dumb, like a fish chasing a shiny hook. I didn't even notice when the lies started stacking up. Business trips that didn't exist. Over time, I wasn't working. Networking events that were just motel rooms off I-95. The stories flowed easier than I expected. I wasn't proud, but I was efficient. As long as the doors of my house stayed closed, as long as my wife didn't look too close, I told myself the fortress would hold. But secrets don't stay locked up forever. They seep through cracks, like water through bad cement. It happened fast, in the end. One morning, I was rushing to get the kids ready for school, and my wife found the receipt. It was just a little slip of paper, crumpled in the pocket of my jacket. 1 room, 2 guests, date and time printed right there in black ink. Nothing I could explain away. Her face didn't change much when she showed it to me. That scared me more than if she had screamed. I stood there like a kid caught stealing candy, mouth dry, brain blank. She didn't say anything, just walked out of the room with the receipt dangling from 2 fingers like it was contaminated. I didn't follow her. Couldn't think of a single word that would fix it. I knew I had to cut it off. That afternoon, sitting in the back of my car in the office parking lot, I wrote Becky a long message. I told her it was over. No more texts, no more meetings. I said I was sorry for leading her on. I said I loved my family. Hit send before I could chicken out. For about 10 minutes, I felt relieved, like maybe I had done the adult thing at last. Then the replies started. First sad, then angry. How could you? You lied to me too. You used me. They kept coming, rapid fire. I muted my phone. 5 minutes later, it was vibrating again. New number, more messages. By the end of the day, I'd gotten 30 calls, half from numbers I didn't recognize. Some voicemails were just breathing. One was her crying. I blocked her number. She made new ones, blocked those too. Then she started emailing. Fake accounts, weird names, always the same voice underneath. At night, I laid in bed and stared at the red glow of my phone charging across the room. Every buzz like a fire alarm going off in my chest. At work, it got worse. I started parking in the far lot, taking side doors in, ducking past the receptionist desk like a fugitive. I stopped using the elevator. Too exposed. I jogged up 5 flights of stairs to my office every morning, sweating through my shirt before 9 a.m. Every time a door opened behind me, I jumped. Every unexpected noise made my skin crawl. My wife saw the change. She asked if something was wrong. I said the company was downsizing, lots of layoffs coming. She nodded, said she understood, but I could tell she didn't believe me all the way. I wasn't sleeping. My phone stayed in my pocket all day on silent, but somehow I still heard phantom buzzes, imagined her face popping up every time I glanced at a screen. One night, walking out of work, I saw a car parked across the street. Engine idling, headlights off. I couldn't see the driver. I walked faster, keys ready in my hand. The car didn't move. I got in my own car and locked the doors fast, heart pounding so loud it drowned out everything else. The next morning, there was a note tucked under my windshield wiper. The next morning, I found a photo in my inbox. It was of my house, taken from a car parked down the street. The image was grainy, but there was no mistaking it. The porch lights were on, and I could make out the outline of the front door. Below it, in the message, were the words, "You think I'm joking?" My stomach dropped. I couldn't breathe for a moment. I went cold. I told myself I had to do something. I couldn't just sit here and let it spiral further. My wife was still in the kitchen, getting the kids ready for school. I kissed her quickly on the cheek, grabbed my jacket, and left the house before I even had a chance to explain. I ordered a taxi, but my mind was spinning with panic. At the police station, I was shaking as I filled out the report. The officer was kind, but the look in his eyes told me he didn't think much could be done. Without a direct threat, without a clear violation, the law was tied up in red tape. I tried to stay calm as he took down the details, but I could barely focus on what he was saying. I could barely hear anything over the deafening thrum of my own heart. When I left the station, I pulled out my phone, hoping there was nothing new. I was wrong. There was an alert, a new message. I opened it. A picture of my son's school. The sign was visible in the background. The fear that gripped me was like being submerged in thick, suffocating fog. I could barely see anything clearly anymore. My world was starting to shrink around me. I knew then. Words weren't going to stop her. I needed more than just a police report. I rushed home, gave my wife some flimsy excuse about more work, and then immediately called a security company to upgrade our system. New locks, cameras, the works. My mind spun as I tried to breathe normally, tried to act like everything was okay. But I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind that rattled the windows made my heart skip a beat. It was like the fear had settled into my bones. That night, it happened. I was half asleep when I heard it. Soft at first, then louder. A knock at the door. I shot up from the couch, adrenaline flooding my veins. My wife was still upstairs with the kids, thankfully. I grabbed the nearest thing I could, a heavy book, and crept toward the door. Another knock. This time, harder. I couldn't breathe. I felt my body freeze up for a moment. The knock came again, louder, followed by a voice, familiar but twisted. "Let me in, you coward." Becky. I recognized the voice immediately. It sent a chill down my spine that made every nerve in my body pulse. I pressed my back against the door, bracing myself. She was on the other side. I could feel her. I heard a scrape, then the sound of metal being dragged across the wood. My wife, from upstairs, was already calling 911. Her voice was shaky, but I could hear her trying to stay calm, trying to buy time. I wasn't sure if I could hold the door for much longer. The knocking turned into pounding, frantic. My heart was in my throat. The knife scraped against the wood again. The sirens came. The wail of them echoed through the night, cutting through the tension. I could hear the rush of voices outside. Becky's pounding stopped suddenly, and I felt my body loosen, but I didn't move from the door. I stayed there, waiting, until I heard the unmistakable sound of police radios. Becky didn't fight as they arrested her. The officers had her hands cuffed in seconds, and they led her to a patrol car. I stood there shaking, feeling the weight of what could have happened. One of the officers came back to speak to me. "We found something in the trunk of her car," he said quietly. "A pack of photos of your kids." I didn't say anything. I couldn't. The blood drained from my face. I could feel my legs shaking. It wasn't just me she was after. She was after my family. They took her away, and I couldn't even bring myself to look at her as they did. I didn't want to. I didn't want to see anything but the backs of the patrol cars disappearing into the dark. We moved shortly after. I couldn't stay there anymore. Too many bad memories. Too many moments that had almost shattered everything I had. We found a place closer to my parents, somewhere with more eyes on the street, more protection. The house was a fortress now, everything locked up tighter than before. Becky's lawyer tried to fight the restraining order. There were hearings, but it didn't matter. The court didn't want her anywhere near us. They said we were safe now. I didn't believe it. Not fully. Not after everything that had happened. I've been going to therapy. I know I need to. The nights are the hardest. Every small sound makes me jump. I check the locks over and over, and I still can't sleep without checking the security cameras. I know it's not healthy, but I can't stop. I can't go back to what it was before. My wife forgave me. She says she understands. She says it's behind us now. But I can see the way she looks at me sometimes. There's always a hint of suspicion in her eyes, a shadow that wasn't there before. The kids sleep soundly at night. They don't know everything that happened. They just know their dad is a little more nervous, a little more anxious. The sirens have faded. The echo of the choice I made still lingers. I think about it sometimes, when the house is quiet, when I'm the only one awake. And then I hear it. The phone rings. No one's calling. But the sound is there, clear and sharp, like a reminder. It's gone now. but it still feels like it's waiting. We bought this small house with a porch and a squirrel-shaped mailbox, thinking it would be our little piece of peace. It was one of those quiet suburbs, all trimmed lawns and waving neighbors, the kind of place where nothing bad ever happened. My husband spent his weekends polishing an old retro Buick he picked up from an estate sale. I started a cooking blog, posting pictures of muffins and homemade jams, trying to build something slow and steady. Our days had a kind of rhythm. Morning coffee, long walks after dinner, evenings with soft jazz playing in the background. It felt strong, like thick beams holding up a roof. At first, I thought I was imagining it. He started staying later at work, saying there was always a meeting or a client that needed last-minute attention. When he got home, he'd sit on the couch, hunched over his phone, scrolling with a face I couldn't read. I tried telling myself it was nothing. I baked more muffins, thinking the smell of cinnamon and butter would fill the cracks I was starting to feel between us. Sometimes he'd look up and smile, but it was a mechanical thing, like the way you nod at a neighbor you don't really know. Nights grew heavier. Rain came often, tapping at the roof in a steady, nervous rhythm that seemed to echo the feeling in my chest. I'd lie awake listening to it, staring into the dark, while he lay turned away from me, phone screen glowing faintly under the blanket. The air in the house seemed thicker, the silences more stretched out. I told myself it was a phase, that everyone goes through weird patches. But the way he moved, the way he avoided my eyes, made the house feel less like a home and more like a stage set about to collapse. One Thursday night, it was worse. The rain hammered harder than usual, drowning out the usual soft noises of the neighborhood. I was dozing on the edge of sleep when a sound pulled me back. I stayed still, listening. It was his voice, low and steady, coming from the living room. He was talking to someone. I didn't hear anyone else respond. I shifted a little, just enough to hear better without moving the mattress. His words were blurred at first, but then certain phrases cut through the rain. Insurance policy, her name, after it happens, we'll be free. My stomach twisted. My hand slid under the blanket, gripping the sheets tight. He sounded calm, almost casual, like he was reading a grocery list. I caught more pieces. It'll look like an accident. New start. No mistakes. There was a finality in his voice that didn't sound rehearsed or unsure. He wasn't dreaming. He wasn't practicing lines for a play. I pressed my fingers against my mouth, trying not to make a sound. The air in the bedroom felt too big, too cold. The rain wasn't tapping anymore. It was slamming into the roof like fists. I strained to hear if there was another voice, someone answering him, but it was just him talking into the empty room, or maybe into a phone. My mind raced in tight circles, crashing into itself. Then, the floor creaked near the living room entrance. His voice cut off immediately. Silence bloomed outwards like a dropped glass shattering on tile. I stayed frozen, breathing shallowly, trying to listen past the rain. His steps came closer, slow and careful. Then his voice, a little too loud and a little too soft at the same time, floated down the hallway. "You awake?" My mouth was dry. I fumbled for something to say. "Container lid," I mumbled, barely forming the words. "Fell off the counter." I forced a small laugh, like it was nothing, like I was still half asleep and didn't know anything. For a moment, there was no sound. Then the floor creaked again, further away this time. I waited, counting in my head until I heard the couch creak under his weight again. I stayed frozen under the blanket, my ears straining for any noise that could tell me what he was doing. Every instinct screamed that I couldn't stay until morning. I couldn't lie here and wait for whatever accident he was planning to happen. I needed to leave. I needed to leave now, before locks turned and windows were nailed shut. I slid my legs out from under the covers, moving slow, careful not to make the bed groan. The air bit at my skin. I grabbed my phone off the nightstand and tucked it into the waistband of my pants. My heart beat loud enough that I thought he might hear it through the walls. I tiptoed toward the bedroom door, pausing when the floor gave a tiny, betraying squeak. I held my breath. No sound from the living room. I edged forward again. The hallway was dark. The only light came from the dim blue TV screen flickering in the living room. I could see the back of his head, hunched forward, shoulders tight. He wasn't looking at me. I moved down the hallway, stepping on the edges of the floorboards where I remembered they didn't creak. The front door was only a few feet away, but it felt like crossing an ocean. My fingers closed around the door handle. I turned it slowly, feeling every click of the mechanism vibrate through my arm. The night air pushed in, cold and wet. I slipped outside, pulling the door shut behind me with as little sound as possible. The porch was slick with rain. I didn't let myself run. Not yet. Not until I was off the porch, off the driveway. I stepped out into the darkness, the rain swallowing me up. I gathered the papers into my camera bag, hands shaking, but moving fast. The front door was locked from the top, impossible to open without a key. I didn't hesitate. I ran through the back hall and made my way to the attic. The space was cramped, dusty, and smelled of old wood. I pulled myself up through the hatch and into the darkness of the roof. The rain hid my footsteps as I crept along the edge of the house. My heart hammered in my chest, but my mind was clear. I couldn't go back in. I couldn't wait for him to find me. I looked at the garage roof below me. It was slick, wet, but it was my only way down. I jumped. The mud splashed up, and I landed hard, my ankle twisting on impact. I gasped, trying to ignore the sharp pain. I didn't stop. I ran toward the neighbor's house, the wet grass slapping my legs as I moved faster, each step desperate. I reached her porch and pounded on the door, nails rattling against the wood. I could feel my breath coming in quick gasps, my legs like lead. Mrs. Hope opened the door, her face full of confusion until she saw the panic in my eyes. "Are you all right?" she asked, her voice cracking. I barely nodded, still breathless. "Please, call the police. He's going to..." I couldn't finish. My hands were shaking too much. She immediately stepped aside, pulling out her phone. "I'll call them right now." I stood in the doorway, hearing the distant wail of sirens getting closer, but it felt like they would never arrive in time. The rain beat down harder, and I couldn't help but thank it. The noise covered everything, covered the fact that I was running for my life. The police arrived quickly, but they wouldn't come inside without a warrant. They stood at the door, eyes scanning the house, while I waited in the neighbor's living room, wrapped in a blanket, trying to keep it together. My body shook from the cold and from fear, but I couldn't look away from the door. Every minute felt like an eternity. When they finally got the warrant and went in, they found everything. The folder with route plans, my insurance policy, and a stack of notes with my daily habits, like he had been tracking my every move. It all fell into place then. The reason he'd been distant, the long hours at work, the way he'd been so careful with his words. The debts from the car restoration made sense now. I was nothing but a way out for him, a way to cover his mistakes, his plans. The neighbors whispered when they saw the Buick being towed away. They didn't know the full story, but they knew something was wrong. I wasn't sure if I cared what they thought anymore. I didn't feel like the same person who had lived there a week ago. The woman who baked muffins to fill the silence. I signed the new statements with a steady hand, my mind processing everything in pieces. He wasn't just a man with a bad habit. He was a threat, and he had been waiting, planning for this. It was chilling, the realization that I had been living in the same house, breathing the same air as someone who had so much control over my fate. The pieces clicked together with a cold precision, a puzzle too dark to finish. Now, I live in a small studio above a flower shop. The apartment is bare, but it's mine. I'm building a new life, one day at a time. My blog has shifted focus. I tell my story now, sharing how muffins won't save you when the danger is too close. The theme has changed. Survival. That's what I write about. It's what I know now. The silence in this place is different. It's my choice. I've learned to be comfortable with it. There's a camera at the entrance now, blinking green, keeping me safe. The windows are always locked, but more than that, I've stopped being afraid of the silence, the absence of sound. The rain used to frighten me, make my skin crawl, but now it's just rain. It's noise. I've learned that the calmest things can hide the most dangerous secrets. The well-manicured lawns and the tidy little streets, the perfect suburban life. I've stopped listening to the rain with dread. Now, I listen because it's a reminder that I escaped, that I made it out before the door closed. I remind myself that the enemy can be much closer than you think, and it always hides in the silence. "7 years of marriage, but lately it felt like talking through glass. I'd say something. She'd nod without really hearing me. At her office parties, I'd watch her laugh at Mark's jokes like he was the funniest man alive. I brought her tea while she worked late at home. She'd barely glance up, just say, "Thanks," and go back to typing. I kept telling myself it was nothing. People get tired. Work gets busy. But the jokes from her coworkers started creeping in. Little comments, half-laughed rumors about her and Mark. I ignored it until I couldn't anymore. Then someone sent me a photo. It was them, standing way too close in the parking lot behind her building. She was smiling, her hand resting lightly on his arm. Nothing obvious, but enough. I showed it to her that night. She rolled her eyes and said it was ridiculous. Said people like to talk, make drama out of nothing. She called it office gossip, and made it sound like I was the crazy one for even asking. I wanted to believe her. I really did. I apologized. We went to bed without another word. Still, at night, when the world got quiet, something inside me twisted. I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, trying to slow down the pounding in my chest. Every little creak in the house felt louder. I pictured her phone lighting up with messages she hid from me. I started noticing small things. How she smiled wider at texts she never showed me. How quick she was to put her phone face down. I hated how suspicious I was becoming. But it didn't feel like paranoia. It felt like noticing things too late. Some nights I thought about asking her again, pushing harder. Other nights, I told myself to wait. Be patient. Don't ruin everything with jealousy. But the air between us thickened. Conversations got shorter. Her hugs felt rehearsed. My heart thudded so loud I could barely hear the hum of the air conditioner. It wasn't just fear. It was the sick certainty that if I looked too closely, everything would break. One weekend, she mentioned a corporate retreat. 2 nights away at some countryside hotel. Team building. Networking, she called it. She smiled as she packed, but it didn't reach her eyes. I carried her suitcase to the car, kissed her cheek. She barely squeezed my hand before driving off. The house felt hollow the second she left. The first evening dragged. I tried watching TV but couldn't focus. Made myself a sandwich, didn't finish it. The wind picked up outside, rattling the trees against the windows. I checked the locks twice before heading to bed early, hoping sleep would come easy for once. It didn't. I tossed, turned, stared at the dark ceiling, counting the seconds between the tree branches tapping the windows. At 2 a.m, a crash jerked me upright, glass shattering downstairs. I froze, holding my breath, listening. Nothing for a long second, then the creak of the floorboards. Not tree branches, not the house settling. Real footsteps. I swung my legs over the bed and stood up too fast. My knees wobbled. I grabbed the baseball bat from under the bed, heart hammering so hard it shook my vision. The hallway outside the bedroom stretched longer than it ever had before. Every step down, it felt like wading through wet cement. The closer I got to the stairs, the stronger the smell of damp air hit me. I peered over the banister. A cold draft curled up from the living room, carrying the sour, metallic scent of broken window glass. I tightened my grip on the bat and moved slowly, careful not to let the stairs creak. At the bottom, the kitchen light was on, but it barely reached the front hallway. In the shadows, something moved, a quick shift of weight, a dark shape slipping past the fridge. I stopped breathing. My palms stuck to the bat's handle. Whoever it was didn't see me yet. I pressed back against the wall, heart pounding against my ribs so hard it hurt. Another footstep. Slow. Careful. Heading toward the living room. I crouched low and slid along the wall to the laundry room door. It was half open. I slipped inside, shut it just enough to hide me but not enough to click. I crouched behind the washing machine, listening. The intruder moved through the kitchen. I heard the fridge door creak open, then shut. Cabinet doors opening, closing. Looking for something. My mouth went dry. I shifted my weight, trying not to make a sound. The room was freezing. The busted window let in the cold, and the wet smell of the night air clung to everything. Through a crack between the door and the frame, I could see the corridor. The kitchen light caught a figure stepping into view. For a second, the moonlight from the broken window lit up his face. It was Mark. He was holding a knife, whispering my wife's name. I couldn't move. My legs were frozen, my breath stuck in my throat. The shock hit hard, like a punch to the gut. I had no idea what to do. Then, instinct kicked in. I turned and sprinted toward the back door. I heard the doggy door slam open, the neighbor's dog barking wildly in the distance. "Where is she?" Mark hissed, his voice full of anger. My blood ran cold. I didn't stop to look back, just kept running. The backyard fence loomed ahead, and I leaped over it, my heart racing, the world blurring around me. The dog's barking intensified. I heard Mark's footsteps behind me, but they were slow, like he was hesitating. The neighbor's porch light flicked on, and I saw their front door open, just a crack. That was enough. The light startled Mark, and I took that moment to push harder, feet pounding the ground as I ran across the yard, heading for safety. I made it to the neighbor's porch and slammed my hand against their door, gasping for air. The door swung open, and I didn't even wait to explain. I just shoved past the startled homeowner, who asked what was going on. "Call the police," I managed to choke out, barely making any sense as my legs gave way. I didn't look back, but I could hear Mark yelling. The sound of his footsteps faded, and it felt like hours before the police arrived. I could barely speak when they asked what happened. My body was still trembling too much. Later, I found out that Mark had left something behind. A business card. It was scratched across the front with a message. "You're in the way." The police were quick to put things together. They found the same card in his jacket pocket when they arrested him. But they also found something else. Something that I never expected. My wife admitted it all. She told me Mark had become obsessed with her after she rejected him, months before any of this even started. She was scared to tell me, afraid it would ruin everything. She said she thought it would go away, that she thought he'd move on. But he didn't. The window was replaced, but it didn't help. Not really. The police made sure we were safe, but the tension in the house never left. We installed cameras, an alarm system. I kept checking the locks, like I could stop the world from spinning out of control. It was hard to feel like things were normal. The photos from the wall were gone. I noticed they disappeared after the police cleared the house, and when I asked about them, I found out Mark had taken them as trophies. My wife looked at me then, silent for a long moment. She didn't cry. I could see it in her eyes, the shame, the regret. But there was nothing more to say. We tried to talk. We still did, at least. But every word felt like it was bouncing off the walls. There was no space between us anymore, just a strange, cold distance. We couldn't find our way back to what we used to be. Every night, I waited for the sound of a creak or the low hum of the window rattling again. But nothing happened. I thought maybe I was just being paranoid. Maybe the worst was over. Months passed, and the tension didn't really ease. We lived like strangers sharing a space. The house was quiet, except for the occasional ringing of the phone or the click of the TV remote. We talked, sure, but the words didn't mean the same anymore. I tried to forgive her for not telling me sooner. Tried to tell myself it wasn't her fault that this had happened. But the shadow of that knife, the image of it gleaming in the moonlight, never left my mind. I'd lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling. My wife slept beside me, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she was miles away. The therapist said we could rebuild trust, that it was possible. But how could we? Every time I heard a car drive past or a laugh from the other room, I tensed, waiting for something to happen, for someone to come knocking at the door again. The kitchen felt different. The walls that used to hold family photos, memories of better days, were empty now. The frames were gone. I couldn't look at the empty space above the table without feeling sick. Sometimes, when she laughed, I caught myself staring at the window, waiting for something, or someone, to show up again. The house felt empty, even though it was full of people. I didn't know how to fix it. I didn't know how to stop looking for the danger that was already there. And each time I heard the smallest noise outside the door, my heart stopped. I was never sure if it was just the house settling, or if it was something more, something that would break the glass again. The mortgage was paid on time, weekends meant barbecue smoke drifting through the backyard, and dinner was usually on the table by 7. It wasn't exciting, but it worked. We had a rhythm. Bills, chores, birthday parties, quiet vacations. The office was the real problem. Endless spreadsheets, pointless meetings, buzz of fluorescent lights, and the clock that never seemed to move. I got sloppy in my boredom, and that's when Ashley happened. It started simple. Casual chats after long meetings. Laughing at the same jokes. Grabbing coffee turned into grabbing drinks. I told myself it was harmless. Work-related. The first time we went out, I called it a financial report review. Told my wife I'd be home late because of quarterly numbers. I paid for the drinks with cash, tossed the receipts. I was careful. Always careful. I deleted every text after reading it. Ashley used a nickname for me in her phone, and I did the same. At home, I made sure to keep things smooth. I changed batteries in the smoke detectors before the chirps started. I sealed the garage every night, checked locks twice. I kept my calendar clean, no weird gaps or mysterious meetings. I even started cooking dinner once a week to stay predictable. My wife never asked questions. She was always busy with the kids, her job, her own circle. I told myself it was fine. Everyone had secrets. Mine was just a little more polished. The double life was just another project to manage, no different from balancing client accounts. Keep schedules tight, cover tracks, anticipate problems before they came up. With every clean getaway from a happy hour or an afternoon client lunch, I felt smarter, slicker, untouchable. Ashley and I kept it light, playful. Never overnight, never anything that would leave traces. A few texts during the day, a meeting in the back of a dive bar on the edge of downtown where nobody knew us. Parking 2 blocks away, different streets each time. I was a ghost. No one would find out because I wouldn't let them. The more time passed, the easier it got. Sometimes when Ashley smiled across the bar table, twisting her straw between her fingers, I forgot there was even anything risky about it. The house, the bills, the perfect suburban picture felt like something happening in the background, like I was watching it through a window instead of living it. I didn't feel guilty. I just felt awake, alive, sharp. It all started to fall apart on a Sunday morning. There was a sticky note on the fridge, bright yellow, stuck just above the handle where I couldn't miss it. Just 3 words, written in blocky, uneven letters. I know. For a second, I thought it was a joke. Maybe one of the kids wrote it. Maybe it was about something stupid like leaving the milk out. I peeled it off and crumpled it into my pocket before anyone could see. My heart was hammering. When my wife walked into the kitchen, she was smiling like always, cheerful even. She looked at the crumpled note in my hand and said, "Maybe the neighbor's kids were playing a prank." Her voice was easy, casual. But her eyes were cold, like polished stone. I nodded and laughed it off, trying not to choke on it. An hour later, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. No message, just a picture. It showed me and Ashley at the parking machine near the dive bar. She was leaning against me, laughing, my hand a little too familiar on her back. The caption read, "You look good together." I stared at it so long the screen went dark. At dinner, she brought up parking downtown like she was asking about the weather, stirring her mashed potatoes, not even looking at me. "You ever have trouble finding a spot near the square?" she asked. I mumbled something about meters and patrols. She nodded, like that was interesting. Her fork clinked against the plate. The sound made my skin crawl. Every time my phone buzzed, even for a calendar reminder or spam text, my stomach twisted. I started carrying it with me everywhere, even into the bathroom, even to the backyard when I took out the trash. I stopped sleeping right. I would lie awake, staring at the shadows on the ceiling, waiting for the next message, the next photo. At work, Ashley noticed something was wrong. "You good?" she asked once when I flinched at a phone vibration. I nodded too quickly, told her I was just tired. One night, I sat in the living room pretending to watch TV. My wife sat across from me, scrolling her phone, her face lit up in blue. Every so often she'd glance up at me and smile, but her eyes stayed cold, like she was studying me. measuring something. When the next text came, I didn't even check it right away. I left the phone face down on the armrest, my hands sweating against my jeans. I didn't want to know. I already knew it would be bad. It would be another photo, or worse, a video. Maybe something from inside the bar. Maybe something from somewhere closer to home. I thought about smashing the phone, throwing it in the river, driving out to the middle of nowhere and starting over. But every idea felt stupid. Panicked. If I made a move too fast, I'd only make it worse. I needed to stay calm. Act normal. Figure out who was behind it. In the kitchen, my wife was humming while she wiped down the counters, like everything was perfectly fine. I could see the edge of another sticky note poking out from under the bread box. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. The night stretched out slow and heavy. Notifications kept buzzing like insects. I sat there frozen, listening to her hum as she cleaned, feeling the trap close tighter around me. The house became unnervingly quiet. Every creak of the floorboard sounded like a warning. My wife went about her day as if everything was normal. Dinner was cooked, the house stayed clean, but there was something different in the way she moved, in the way she never quite looked at me directly. Ashley started getting messages from a blocked number. I saw her looking at her phone one evening, her face pale, her lips pressed tight. She didn't say anything, just tucked it away, but I saw the message preview. It was a threat, a clear one. I didn't ask. The next day, I found something else in the mailbox. A copy of a restaurant bill. It was from the place Ashley and I had gone to weeks ago. The date was highlighted with a marker. The panic inside me grew tighter, like the walls of a small room were closing in. I went through the house, checking the doors again, locking windows. I turned on the TV louder than usual, the noise filling the silence. My wife was in the kitchen, humming to herself, preparing dinner, as though nothing had changed. It was worse than an argument. She wasn't angry, just quiet, cold. She was waiting for me to break, to slip up. I didn't want to give her that satisfaction, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the silence was worse than any shouting. I tried to talk to her once. It didn't go the way I expected. I suggested we go somewhere. Do something to get away from the tension. Maybe a quick trip to IKEA, I said, trying to sound casual. She looked at me, her eyes calculating. She nodded, but didn't seem eager. We spent an hour walking through aisles of shelves, furniture, and knickknacks. I could barely focus on anything. I watched her pick out items, evaluating them like a shopper, but also like someone making a decision. I could feel the weight of the silence between us. She made no effort to engage in small talk. She just kept going, choosing things, her fingers brushing the boxes, then moving on to the next. I followed her, trembling slightly. When we got home, she closed her laptop quickly when I walked into the room, the sound of the lid snapping shut too loud in the stillness. She showed me a recipe for soup, her voice calm, like we were just another ordinary couple. But I knew. She wasn't asking for my words. She wasn't waiting for me to explain myself. She was offering me a chance to admit what I'd done, a chance to confess before it went too far. But I couldn't do it. I couldn't speak. Every tick of the clock was another moment lost, another second where the truth felt too heavy to let out. Now, I'm living in the guest room. It's been weeks. We barely speak. Mornings pass without a word between us. I find another envelope in the kitchen, the familiar weight of it in my hand before I even open it. Another receipt, another photo, another location tag. She's keeping track. She's watching me closely, marking every step I take. The silence hangs in the air, heavier than anything I've ever known. I can't escape it. Her silence is worse than any argument, worse than anything she could say. It's a countdown, a delayed sentence. Ashley is gone from our lives, erased without a trace. She disappeared, and I never heard from her again. I don't know where she is or what happened, but the emptiness between my wife and me has only grown. I can feel it, every day. The space between us is filled with all the things left unsaid, all the truths left unspoken. My wife could destroy everything with a single move. She doesn't need words. She doesn't need anything from me. She's waiting for the moment when the silence becomes unbearable, when I finally crack. I wait too. I wait for the moment when the stillness breaks, when the truth comes out, and everything falls apart. The scariest part is not knowing when that will happen. Every day feels like a trap closing in. It was around 3 in the morning, and the baby had been screaming for what felt like forever. I paced back and forth through the living room, rubbing my eyes, trying to calm him down. Nothing worked. My wife was passed out upstairs, completely exhausted after another night shift. I didn't blame her. I was barely hanging on myself. After another hour of bouncing and rocking, he finally drifted off. I laid him gently in the crib and just stood there in the dark, my mind buzzing with exhaustion and resentment. Instead of going back to bed, I found myself sitting at the kitchen table, phone in hand, staring at the glow of the screen. One swipe turned into 20. Then Hazel's profile popped up. She wasn't like the others, not flashy, not posing. She talked about her love for craft beer and old vinyl records. Something about it made me pause. Before I knew it, I had messaged her. Over the next week, we kept chatting. It was easy, light, funny. She had this dry, sarcastic way of texting that felt like a life raft in the endless sea of diapers and midnight feedings. I told myself it was nothing serious, just someone to talk to, someone who remembered what it was like to be an adult. After 7 days of messages, Hazel suggested we meet. Nothing fancy, just a drink at her place, late at night. After the little ones are asleep, she joked. I laughed too hard at that. Guilt gnawed at me, but the idea of sneaking out for just a couple of hours pulled stronger. I told myself it was just a drink. Nothing would happen. I made a fake contact in my phone, labeled her number under Steve Jim. I disabled my phone's location tracking, double-checked the monitor upstairs. My wife was dead asleep, baby breathing steady on the screen. I slipped out the door into the thick night air, telling myself I'd be back before anyone noticed. I took the elevator down to the parking garage. Every ding of the floors felt louder than it should have. I kept telling myself to turn around, that it was stupid, that it was wrong. But I didn't. I got into the car and drove. The address she sent wasn't far, maybe 15 minutes across town. The roads were almost empty, just a few trucks lumbering down the highway. I pulled into a cracked asphalt lot behind an old building that looked half abandoned. Some windows were boarded up, paint peeled off the brick in long curling strips. A single yellow streetlight flickered overhead. I sat there for a minute with the engine running, feeling the wrongness settle into my chest. I typed out a quick message. Here. Within seconds, Hazel replied. Come up, 3rd floor. Doors open. I got out, pulling my jacket tight against the cold. The front entrance was a battered metal door hanging half off its hinges. Inside, the stairwell smelled like mold and old water damage. The walls were covered in peeling, stained wallpaper. The air was damp, heavy. I thought about leaving. just getting back in the car and driving home. But then another message buzzed in. Hurry, I'm waiting. It felt too late to back out now. I started up the stairs. My footsteps echoed in the empty space. 3rd floor. Her door was the last one down a long, narrow hallway. Faded red numbers were painted above it. As I approached, I noticed the door was cracked open just a little bit, and a warm light spilled out from inside. There was a smell, sweet but chemical, like cheap vanilla air freshener. I knocked lightly, but the door swung open wider at the touch. I stepped inside. The apartment was dim, lit only by a single floor lamp in the narrow entryway. Shadows loomed in the corners, thick and unmoving. The door clicked shut behind me. I spun around, but there was no one there. Just the door, now closed, and the sound of the lock turning. I froze. My ears strained against the silence. A shape moved at the edge of the light. A man, big, wearing a dark hoodie, stepping out from the shadowed hallway deeper inside the apartment. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. I realized then that Hazel wasn't here. Or if she had been, it didn't matter anymore. My feet edged back toward the door, but the man took a step forward, heavy and deliberate, cutting off my escape. I had walked straight into a trap. The man didn't need to say much. He didn't have to explain why he was here. He just held up his phone, showing me pictures, photos of my wife, my baby, even our house. He rattled off names, addresses, school locations. His voice was low, but clear. 5,000, or I make a call. Your family's life gets real messy. I didn't know how he had all this information. It didn't matter. I was frozen, staring at the images. He made no move to hide the phone, just waited for me to react. Hazel's face, the one I'd been texting for days, was nowhere to be seen. Instead, she stood in the background, a blur. I couldn't focus on her, not with everything crashing down around me. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my wallet, hands shaking. The phone screen flashed again with a message from him. You do it now or I make the call. It's easy, you know. People like you think they can just play around. He wasn't joking. With trembling fingers, I opened my banking app. I transferred the money, 5,000. It felt like I was signing away everything. My dignity, my family's safety, my future. The confirmation screen flashed on my phone. The money was gone. Just like that. The man glanced at the phone screen, then up at me. A grim smile spread across his face. He pulled the phone back and slid it into his pocket. 1 more 1,000, or we go further. You understand? I nodded, numb. My hand instinctively went back to my wallet. I didn't want to fight. I didn't want to argue. I didn't want to die here tonight. I transferred the last of it. 1,000 more. Another confirmation. Another betrayal. The pain of it seemed distant, muffled. The man's lips stretched into a wide grin. He gave a low chuckle. Good choice, he said, turning toward the door. Without a word, he threw on his coat and flung the door open wide. I hesitated, looking around the dim apartment. I wanted to ask for help, but I knew there was no one to call. The only thing I could do now was leave. I moved toward the door, the cold air hitting me like a slap as I stepped out onto the landing. The hall seemed even darker now, more oppressive. I made my way down the narrow stairs, gripping the metal railing as I descended. The cold seeped into my bones. The neon sign from the abandoned shop below flickered, as if mocking me. The rhythmic pulse of the light echoed in my skull. The moment my feet hit the sidewalk, my phone buzzed in my pocket. Another notification. Another payment gone. The screen showed the withdrawal, and I felt my stomach twist in a knot. Shame and fear clung to my skin. I had just paid a man who knew everything about me, everything about my family. I couldn't look around. I couldn't think straight. All I wanted was to escape, to get in the car and drive away from this nightmare. But I knew it was already too late. The damage had been done. My phone buzzed again, and I could almost hear it laughing at me. Every beep, every buzz felt like a trap closing in. When I got home, I locked the door behind me and stood in the entryway, still shaking. My heart pounded in my chest, every sound in the house making me flinch. The kitchen light flickered. I heard the soft creak of the floorboards upstairs, my wife's soft breathing through the baby monitor. But none of it felt real anymore. I had to keep up the lie. I had to keep pretending. I couldn't let her know what had happened. She'd never understand. I would never explain it to her. The guilt and shame weighed down on me like a physical force. I told her the server at work had crashed. A technical issue. Just a late night, I said. She nodded, not suspecting anything, and went back to her routine. It felt wrong to speak to her, to see her smile, knowing what I'd just done. The next morning, I canceled the credit cards. I filed a fraud report with the bank. I told myself it would be fine. I would fix it. But I knew, deep down, there was no fixing this. I had crossed a line I couldn't uncross. Now, every time I get in the elevator, I feel trapped. It's like I'm in a cage, the walls closing in, with nowhere to hide. Every door in this building feels like a potential threat. I can't even look at the clock on my phone without feeling the weight of time pressing down on me. Every minute, every second, feels like it's costing me something I can never get back. I still check the bank app, though. I check my accounts. The fear never goes away. Every time I hear my phone buzz, my heart skips a beat, expecting another message, another demand. The fear is always there, like a shadow that never leaves. I've learned my lesson, but the price is too high. And now, every night, when the house is quiet and I lay awake next to my wife, I wonder when the next trap will come. "10 months of planning, endless weekends tasting cakes, picking colors, arguing over napkin folds. Everything was perfect now. The reception hall smelled like fresh linen, the tables were spotless, and my soon-to-be mother-in-law was fussing with the boutonnieres, muttering under her breath about getting the pins just right. I stood off to the side, half tuning her out, practicing my vows under my breath. I could see my reflection in the window. Black suit, hair a little too neatly combed, nerves tightening every muscle. It should have felt like a dream coming true, but a shadow kept creeping in the back of my mind. It was from my bachelor party 2 weeks ago. We had gone to the coast. It was supposed to be innocent, just a night drinking beers, renting surfboards, sleeping like dead men in sand-dusted motels. But then there was Jade. She was part of another group at the beach bar, laughing a little too loudly, knocking back shots. I remember the way her green dress clung to her when she ran into the surf. I remember how her lips tasted salty when she kissed me under the breaking waves. Stupid mistake. Drunk. It felt harmless at the time. Her number was deleted before the sun came up, the guilt buried deep. I hadn't told anyone. I kept telling myself it didn't mean anything. It was like a splinter under my skin I chose to ignore. The organ started playing, low and steady, the notes crawling up the stone arches overhead. People shuffled into pews, the shush of dresses and rustle of programs filling the air. My palms itched. The church felt like it could hold the weight of anything. Solid stone walls, tall windows catching the late afternoon sun, the heavy scent of old wood and polish grounding me. I stepped onto the aisle carpet. Every footstep thudded too loud in my ears, but I kept walking, eyes locked on the altar. The priest stood waiting, smiling kindly. I nodded back, pretending I was steady. I tried not to think. Not about Jade. Not about anything. Just about Lily, waiting behind the doors, about to walk into my life for good. The music rose, swelling through the air, and for a second, everything did feel okay. Normal. Safe. The secret stayed buried, like a stone at the bottom of a river. Nothing could reach it. The soft scent of lavender and candle wax hit me first. It wrapped around the air, sweet and thick, almost making me dizzy. The carpet stretched long and deep red beneath my feet, and at the far end of the aisle, the doors opened. There she was. Lily stood framed in the light, her dress simple and perfect, her smile tight, but real. Her dad was at her side, walking slow, step by careful step. I couldn't stop staring at her. She looked like something pulled out of a world where bad things didn't happen. The guests all turned in their seats to watch, smiles breaking out, camera phones lifting discreetly. Lily caught my eye, and her smile grew wider. For the first time all day, I almost smiled back. The priest cleared his throat and started speaking, his voice booming against the stone. He talked about loyalty, about bonds that couldn't be broken, about trust being the foundation of everything. I tried to listen, but my head was swimming. I just needed to get to the vows, get the ring on her finger, make it official. Then everything would quiet down inside me. Then I could breathe. Then the door slammed open. It wasn't the way it was supposed to open. It slammed so hard the sound echoed down the aisle, making people jump in their seats. A beam of sunlight sliced into the dark church. Dust motes spun wildly in it. Standing there, panting like she had run all the way from hell itself, was Jade. Not the girl from the beach bar, not the laughing stranger. Jade, in a blood-red dress that clung to her the same way the water had that night. In her hands, she held papers, flapping like broken wings. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't even blink. Her voice tore through the silence, rough and furious. "He's a liar!" she screamed, pointing at me like I was something disgusting crawling across the floor. Everyone turned, heads swiveling, murmurs rising like the tide. Lily froze halfway down the aisle, her hand tightening around her father's arm. Jade stepped forward, shoving the papers into the air. They caught the sunlight, a mix of printed screenshots and phone selfies, ugly and undeniable. The night from the beach lit up for everyone to see. My drunk face smiling too close to hers, her arm wrapped around my waist, the kiss. The messages after. Stupid, clumsy things like, "Don't tell anyone," and "It didn't mean anything." The whole room fell into a stunned, awful silence. You could hear the candles flickering. My heartbeat crashed in my ears, louder than the organ, louder than Jade screaming, louder than anything else. And just like that, it felt like the ground disappeared from under me. Lily stood there, staring at the photos in Jade's hands. The tears in her eyes shimmered like glass, too heavy for her to blink away. I saw her lips tremble as the silence stretched on, and I could feel my chest tightening. The whole world seemed to collapse, piece by piece, as the reality set in. My throat was thick with guilt, but my body couldn't move. I couldn't speak. The room felt like it was spinning. Lily's father standing frozen, his face blank, his eyes staring into nothing, was the first to look away. The moment her gaze flicked to him, I thought she might break down completely. She didn't even wipe her eyes. She just kept looking at those pictures. And then, her brother, bigger than most men, his arms solid from years of rugby, lunged at me, fury burning in his eyes. His hands reached for me, but before he could get close, two guests grabbed him by the arms, holding him back. He was shouting things I couldn't make out, but his anger filled the room like a sickness. Jade didn't stop. She shouted the details, each word cutting deeper. The date, the drinks, the price of cocktails we bought that night. I didn't care. It was all just noise. The microphone screeched, and the sound echoed painfully, making everything worse. The buzzing only added to the chaos. Jade's voice filled every corner, too sharp, too clear. People were whispering, some trying to comfort Lily, some backing away, unsure what to do next. I didn't know what to do either. I tried to speak, but my mouth was dry. The words stuck in my throat. My tongue felt like lead. Through the haze of panic, I saw Lily's father again. His gaze was empty, just a hollow stare that didn't meet anyone's eyes. His silence was worse than anything Jade could scream. He didn't move, didn't try to comfort his daughter, didn't stop the madness. And in that moment, I realized the wedding was over. It wasn't just Jade's intrusion. It was the whole thing. The marriage we'd planned for so long, gone. The brother broke free from the people holding him back, charging toward me. He didn't care about anyone else. His hands reached for my neck, and I could hear him shouting my name like a warning. I stepped back, heart pounding, desperate to avoid him. But before he could get close, the sharp ring of a knife sliced through the air. It was a cake knife, big, sharp, and shining under the lights. He grabbed it off the table with wild eyes. People screamed, stepping back. My body jerked, frozen. My friends rushed forward, trying to block him, trying to keep him away, forming a makeshift wall between us. The sound of glass breaking. A crash. The fight was chaotic, everyone scrambling to get out of the way. Guests were shouting, some running toward the exit, some trying to calm things down. Someone called for security. Someone screamed for help. But Lily, she stood there in the middle, motionless. Her tears fell silently down her face, her lips barely moving. She wasn't even looking at me anymore. Her eyes were just lost, distant. I wanted to go to her, but the chaos kept me pinned in place. The security guard came charging through, grabbing the brother by the arm and forcing him toward the exit. He fought back, but the guard was stronger. Slowly, the crowd began to break apart. Lily's father, still standing in that dead-eyed stare, turned and walked out. He didn't even glance back at his daughter. The other guests were ushered out quickly, like it was a fire drill. One by one, they disappeared through the exit doors, leaving me alone in the ruins of what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. I was left standing on the carpet, the smell of flowers and broken promises thick in the air. The space felt suddenly empty, cold, the sound of footsteps fading away. When the last of the guests were gone, the doors closed behind them with a soft thud, and I was left alone in the dark church, the faintest echoes of the organ still ringing in my ears. The flowers, still there, still perfect, now felt wrong. They smelled like bitterness. I could almost taste it in the air, a stinging reminder of everything I had lost. The wedding was officially canceled. Lily left that night, taking only a small bag, without saying a word to anyone. Her sister came to pick her up, and they left without a sound. I tried calling her, but my calls went straight to voicemail. Jade, the woman who had destroyed everything, was gone by morning. No one knew where she went. She'd gotten what she wanted, the attention, the drama. The videos of the wedding went viral in less than an hour. The chaos was online, everywhere. People were talking about it, laughing, sharing clips of Jade shouting in the church, the photos of us in the bar, the mess of it all. I wasn't just the guy who ruined his wedding. I was the guy caught in a scandal. My company acted fast. The HR team pulled me in. They said they couldn't risk the bad publicity. They couldn't have me associated with the mess. I was fired before I even had a chance to explain. The silence after that was deafening. The office felt like a ghost town when I packed up my things. They didn't care about my side of the story. Now, I live in a friend's spare room, surrounded by boxes of things I haven't even unpacked. It's not much, but it's something. I can't escape the feeling that something is always watching me. The echo of what happened at the church is still there too. It plays in my head, like a broken record. I walk past the mirror and see the same man I used to be. Someone who thought he had it all figured out. Someone who didn't realize how much a single mistake could cost. The organ song never really stopped. Not in my mind. It still plays. A constant reminder of how fast everything can crumble. The shame lingers. It always will. The price of a single moment of weakness. Sam and I had been tight since college, baseball on weekends, stuffing ourselves with greasy pizza after exams, fixing up old motorcycles in his dad's garage. When I bought my first house, Sam was there, slapping on paint in what would be my daughter's nursery, cracking jokes to keep my nerves from getting the better of me. He laughed at my dumb worries, always brushing them off like dust. The last few months, him and Emma had been working on fixing up the back deck together. Emma said it needed new boards, fresh paint before summer. I was busy with work, traveling more, so I was glad someone was around to help her. That's what friends were for. Still, some things didn't sit right. His bike was often parked in the driveway, even when he told me he was on shift. Emma told me I was just jealous, reading too much into everything. She said I needed to stop making up stories in my head. I wanted to believe her. I wanted everything to stay simple, the way it had always been. Sam and I had a friendship built like a rock. It didn't make sense to question it. I kept pushing doubts away, blaming stress, lack of sleep, long nights away from home. When I got back from the last business trip, it was early, still dark outside. I didn't text, thought I'd surprise Emma with breakfast from that diner she liked. The house looked normal from the outside. Porch light off, blinds pulled. I parked in the driveway, killed the engine, sat there for a second. The air was cold and still. I remember noticing the trash cans were full even though I had asked her to roll them out. Stupid detail to catch on, but it stuck. I went up the steps, unlocked the front door quietly. Inside, it was dead silent, except for the tick of the living room clock. No TV, no music, not even the creak of the old pipes. My boots barely made a sound on the hardwood. I set the paper bag of food on the kitchen counter and called out, soft at first. Nothing. I walked through the hall. The bathroom door was open, lights off. The bedroom was empty, bed made too neatly. My stomach started feeling heavy, like I swallowed a brick. I moved toward the living room. That's when I saw them. Sam and Emma, tangled up on the couch, her head on his shoulder, his hand on her thigh. They weren't saying anything, just sitting there like they belonged that way. The room was dim, but the light from the window was enough. I stood frozen for what felt like an hour, heart hammering in my ears. Sam looked up first. His face dropped, eyes wide like a kid caught stealing. Emma jerked back, pulling at her sweater like that would change what I'd just seen. I couldn't think, couldn't even breathe right. My hand went for the door without me even realizing it. I slammed it shut behind me so hard the glass rattled. Got in my truck, didn't know where I was driving. just needed to move, get away before I did something stupid. The road stretched out in front of me, all blurry and useless. I don't even remember turning onto the highway. Heart pounding like a drum, brain just a loud, stupid hum. I circled the same streets 3 times without realizing it. The truck's heater was blasting, but my hands were cold on the steering wheel. I kept seeing it, Sam's arm around her, the way her body leaned into his like it was the most natural thing in the world. Like it hadn't even crossed their minds they were burning everything to the ground. Sam, the guy who taught me how to change a tire, who picked me up when my first girlfriend dumped me. Sam, who stood next to me at my wedding. The betrayal sat heavy in my chest, burning hotter by the minute. I gripped the wheel tighter, knuckles white, jaw locked so hard my teeth hurt. I couldn't make sense of it. No fights, no warnings. 1 second life was normal. The next it was ripped apart. The same streets kept flashing past. The same empty gas station. The same dark diner with the neon sign flickering. I turned without thinking, tires squealing a little on the wet pavement. Somewhere along the way, the sun started to come up, a sick yellow creeping across the sky. It didn't feel real. None of it felt real. I pulled into an empty parking lot by the river. Killed the engine and just sat there, watching the water move slow and heavy under the bridge. I didn't know what to do next. Couldn't go home, not yet. Couldn't call anyone. Words felt useless. The air inside the truck got thick and hard to breathe. I opened the door and stumbled out, boots crunching on the gravel. Leaned against the hood and stared out across the water, letting the cold morning air slap me in the face. My fists kept clenching and unclenching like they had a mind of their own. Sam destroyed more than trust. He bulldozed years of memories, of loyalty, of believing in someone without needing proof. I could still see his stupid helmet sitting in my garage, the one he left there because he said he didn't have space at his apartment. My garage, my house, my life. The empty wind howled down the riverbank, tossing a soda can across the lot. I watched it tumble and roll until it disappeared under a broken fence. I didn't move, didn't even blink. Just stood there, cold seeping into my bones, heart boiling under my jacket. The clock on the dashboard ticking louder and louder behind me. Late in the evening, Sam showed up, pale and nervous, his hands shaking. He didn't speak at first, just stood there in the doorway, eyes wide like he was lost. I didn't wait for him to explain. I told him I was going to tell his wife. His face twisted, and for a moment I thought he was going to beg, but instead, he rushed forward. His hands reached for something, anything, to stop me, and his fingers closed around the crystal vase, a gift from my parents. He was breathing fast, eyes red, almost frantic. "You don't understand," he said, voice shaking, but I didn't care. I told him again, slower this time, that I was going to tell her. He didn't listen. In a split second, he was moving towards me, the vase raised in his hand. I stepped back, startled, but my foot caught on the rug. Before I could react, the vase slipped from his hands, crashing onto the floor. The sound of the shattering crystal rang in my ears, sharp and jagged, like the silence that followed it. I froze, staring at the broken pieces scattered across the floor. Sam stood there, eyes wide, his breath coming out in jagged gasps. He didn't say anything after that. His eyes locked onto mine for a brief second, full of something I couldn't place, and then he turned and ran out of the house, leaving the mess behind. The door slammed behind him, and the only sound left in the room was the high-pitched ringing in my ears. I looked down at the pieces of the vase, then at the spot on the floor where he had stood, The finality of it all hit me in waves. I picked up one shard, cold and sharp in my hand, and stared at it. That was the end of the friendship. Just like that. Shattered. 3 months passed. The hardwood floor still had the scratch marks from the vase, though I'd tried to clean them up as best I could. Sam had moved out, and his wife had filed for divorce. Emma and I were seeing a counselor, trying to patch up what was left of our marriage. It wasn't easy. The air was thick with doubt, like we were both waiting for the next crack, the next sign that everything might fall apart again. Every morning felt heavy, like we were carrying invisible weights, even though we never spoke about Sam or what happened. His absence was a presence of its own, a constant reminder of the trust broken. The spot where the vase used to sit seemed so empty now. Every time I passed that spot, it felt like something was missing, like the fragility of everything was laid out for me to see. I didn't realize how much that vase had meant until it was gone. Emma never said anything about it, but I knew she noticed too. Sometimes, when I was sitting on the couch or in the kitchen, I'd reach for my phone, fingers hovering over the screen, about to dial Sam's number without thinking. Every time, I'd stop myself. What would I even say to him now? The man I'd trusted, the friend I'd had for years. That was gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. It wasn't just that he had betrayed me. It was that everything had been so normal before that moment, so easy. A decade of friendship, of shared experiences, of laughter, all destroyed in a split second of anger. The weight of that still hung over me, heavy and suffocating. A new vase sat in the box, still unpacked. I couldn't bring myself to open it. It was a gift from Emma, meant to replace the one that had broken that night. But the thought of putting it in the same spot, where the old one used to be, just didn't sit right. The empty space felt like it was a part of us now. A part of what had changed. Something irreparably damaged. Emma was in the kitchen, making breakfast. The sound of plates clinking together, the sizzling of eggs in the pan, the soft hum of the coffee machine. It should have been comforting, but it wasn't. Our daughter was in the next room, laughing at something on the TV, her giggles echoing in the stillness of the house. I looked at her, and for a moment, it felt like everything was still okay, that we could be okay again. But that empty space in the kitchen, that vacant spot where the vase used to be, it was a constant reminder. It reminded me of the crack in my heart, just like the crack in that ceramic vase. No matter how much I tried to ignore it, it was still there. We went on like that for the next few weeks, pretending things were fine. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were just going through the motions, that something was broken and would never be fixed. We drove past the baseball stadium one day, the place where Sam and I used to watch games together, and I remembered those weekends, sitting in the stands, sharing a hot dog, talking about life. It felt like those memories were from someone else's life, a life that didn't belong to me anymore. Everything had changed. The friendship, the trust, the quiet moments in the house, all of it was gone. And no matter how many times I told myself I should let it go, that it was just a stupid mistake, I couldn't. I couldn't let go of the fact that Sam, the man I had known for so long, had turned into someone else, someone who would destroy everything just because of a moment of rage. Now, as I walked through the house, watching Emma make breakfast and listening to our daughter laugh, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were walking a narrow path. Every step felt uncertain, like we were headed toward a cliff and didn't even know it yet. There was no going back, not really. The friendship was gone, and no amount of time or pretending would bring it back. All that was left was the echo of broken glass, ringing in my ears like a warning that we would never be the same again. I met him at a pottery class on a rainy Tuesday night. The studio smelled like wet clay and something faintly sweet, maybe candles burning low somewhere in the back. His teapots were perfect, sleek, smooth, like something you'd see in a magazine. Meanwhile, my little cups looked more like something a kid might make. Still, he complimented them with a small, even voice, said they had character. He moved quietly, cleaning his tools with neat, patient motions. I remember he brought pastries sometimes, homemade ones, though there was always something a little off about them. Underbaked centers, uneven crusts. Still, he offered them up with a soft laugh and a shrug, and it felt like care. We started staying after class a little longer. He talked about his family like it was a heavy backpack he couldn't take off. An ex-wife who made scenes, a kid he barely saw. He wore a simple gold ring at first. I noticed it when he handed me a fresh sponge one evening, but by the time we had our third date, it was gone. No explanation. I should have asked then, but he was kind, and it felt nosy. I worked at a small bookstore 2 bus rides away, and after shifts, I liked to curl up with old books. Dostoevsky, Camus, names that made me feel like I still had some ambition left. He liked that about me, he said. Liked that I wasn't trying to be anything I wasn't. One night, after a late class, he suggested we go get hot chocolate. There was a little food truck parked on a side street, the kind that was more rust than metal. We huddled inside, the windows fogged up, the tiny heater buzzing overhead. He talked about wanting a fresh start, about being done with mistakes. He said, "I'm walking away from it all, you'll see." And I believed him. His hands were warm around the paper cup, his smile just a little too tired. Everything around us felt soft and easy, like wet clay turning under steady fingers. For a while, it stayed simple. He'd show up at the bookstore sometimes with takeout, folding himself into the little reading chairs by the window. I kept making ugly cups, he kept making perfect teapots, and we both pretended it was normal to build something shaky on top of nothing. He started leaving little notes in my coat pockets, bad puns, worse drawings of cats. He smelled like cedar and soap, and when he laughed, it sounded genuine enough to make me forget the tiny alarms in my head. Then, 2 months later, I missed my period. I bought a cheap test from the corner pharmacy, my hands shaking so much the bag crinkled as I stuffed it into my jacket. I waited until I got home from a late shift, the apartment too quiet except for the hum of the fridge. I sat on the edge of the tub, watching the stick with a growing numbness. 2 lines, clear as day. No hesitation. I thought about telling him right away, but chickened out. It took me 3 days to work up the nerve. I texted him to meet me by the river, a place we both liked because it was open and empty, the gray water stretching out under low bridges. I waited on a cracked bench, my breath fogging up in the cold air. He showed up with his hands buried deep in his jacket pockets, his shoulders hunched up like he was bracing against a storm. When I told him, he didn't say anything at first, just stared past me at the river, the wind tugging at his hair. His face went pale, like someone had flipped a switch. I kept waiting for the smile, the hug, the excitement. Instead, he started talking fast, his voice low and tight. He talked about his job, how unstable it was, about money, how little he had, about plans, about how everything was supposed to be different now. His words stumbled over each other, tripping, falling. Then he said it, almost like a slip. "She won't survive this." I blinked. "She?" "My wife," he said, barely above a whisper. It hit like a punch to the stomach. I stood there, feeling the cold seep into my bones. He kept talking about how she was fragile, how he'd promised to be better, how this would destroy everything. His words were jagged, frantic. I tried to say something, tried to catch hold of the conversation, but it was like grabbing smoke. The wind whipped off the river, sharp and cutting. I felt the cold deep in my chest, burning more than the anger, more than the hurt. We stood there, not looking at each other, the sky overhead darkening with heavy clouds. He said he was sorry, over and over, like it could stitch anything back together. I turned and started walking away before I could hear any more. My heart pounded so hard it felt like it might break through my ribs. That night, he showed up, his headlights cutting through the dark like a warning. I saw him pull up from the window, his car parked at the curb, engine still running. The headlights flickered, casting long shadows on the pavement. He had a bag of groceries with him, fresh bread, a bottle of wine, and some fruit. It was obvious he thought it would be enough to make things better. A gesture, a bribe. But I knew better. I didn't open the door right away. I stood by the window, watching him stand there, his shoulders tense, his eyes locked on the door. When I finally stepped outside, I was ready for the confrontation. He stepped forward, thrusting the bag toward me, his voice low but demanding. "We need to figure this out now. We need to fix this before it gets out of hand." I shook my head, refusing. "No, I can handle it. I'm done with all this." His eyes flickered, and something in them changed. It wasn't panic. It was something colder, harder. His voice dropped lower, filled with an edge. "You don't understand what you're doing. You can't just walk away from this." He stepped closer, his presence almost suffocating. I instinctively moved my hand to my phone, ready to press the emergency number if I had to. I felt my heart beat faster, my muscles tensing. He noticed and paused. His gaze hardened even more, but instead of pushing further, he threw the bag down on the porch. "I'll be back," he muttered, his voice cold, before he turned and walked away, his steps fast and angry. I stood there for a long time, staring at the bag. The tension didn't leave my chest. It only got heavier. The next morning, I was barely able to shake off the feeling of dread. My shift at the bookstore dragged on, my fingers numb, my thoughts circling around what had happened. When I came home, there was a package waiting for me. A small, unassuming box. No return address. Inside was a rattle, the kind you buy for a baby, and a note scrawled across a torn scrap of paper. "You'll regret this." The blood drained from my face. My hands shook, and I felt like the walls were closing in. I read the note over and over, as if trying to make sense of it, but nothing changed. I knew what this was. I knew it was a threat, a warning. I could feel the panic rising in my chest. I called in sick the next day and immediately went to the police. I filed a report, and within a couple of hours, they helped me fill out the paperwork for a temporary restraining order. I couldn't wait any longer. I didn't trust him anymore. His words haunted me, and the thought of what he was capable of now felt like a shadow I couldn't escape. That evening, I changed the locks on my doors. It felt like I was taking some control back. It wasn't much, but it was something. I spent the night at my friend's place. The phone was on silent, but I couldn't ignore the anxiety every time it buzzed. I didn't answer his messages. The first one was a simple question. "Where are you?" The next was a threat. "You can't hide forever." Then came another. "I'll make you regret it." Each message made my stomach tighten. But I didn't respond. I couldn't. The fear was there, but something else was beginning to grow in me too. Determination. I wasn't going to be his victim. The next few days were a blur of police visits, more paperwork, and phone calls with my lawyer. I started making plans to leave. I packed what I could, making sure to keep all important documents close. There was no telling what he might do next, and I couldn't risk staying in a place where I felt unsafe. The thought of leaving everything behind, of walking away from the life I had built, was terrifying. But staying wasn't an option anymore. I had to protect myself, and I had to protect the baby. The one thing that kept me moving forward now was the life growing inside me. I couldn't let him destroy that. The morning of the hearing arrived faster than I expected. My lawyer was confident, but the weight of what was happening was hard to ignore. I sat in the small, sterile courtroom, my hands resting on my lap, fingers twitching. The air felt thick with tension. The judge was a middle-aged man with glasses that kept slipping down his nose. He seemed detached, not interested in the emotions of the case, only in the facts. The room was quiet, and I couldn't stop thinking about the bear. The soft, worn teddy bear that sat on the table beside me. My first gift for the baby. It seemed out of place in the sterile environment of the courtroom, but it grounded me. It reminded me that this wasn't just about me anymore. This was about protecting my child. The hearing went on. The lawyers spoke for both sides, arguing facts, reciting laws, painting him as a threat. I tried to focus on the words, to make sense of the cold, hard legal language, but my mind kept drifting. To the baby, to the future I was fighting for. Every argument made against him felt like a small victory, but it wasn't enough. It never would be until I had full control. I glanced at my phone. Another text from him. "You'll be sorry." I didn't look at it. The phone was a tool now, not a cage. It wasn't going to control me. I silenced it and slipped it back into my bag. I wasn't going to let him have any more power over me. The judge finally banged his gavel, announcing his decision. The restraining order would be made permanent. He was forbidden from coming near me or contacting me again. The weight that lifted from my chest in that moment was heavy, but it was a relief too. The battle wasn't over, but it felt like the first real victory. It was the first step in reclaiming my life. My hands, still trembling slightly, held the teddy bear tighter as I stood up to leave the courtroom. As I walked out, I looked down at my phone once more. His last message was still unread, but I didn't need to read it. The answer was already clear. I wasn't going to let fear dictate my future. I wasn't going to let him win. The story wasn't over yet, and this time, I was the one writing it. I had been working private cases for about 10 years already. Mostly family stuff, missing teenagers, cheating husbands. Nothing glamorous like the movies. That Friday started like 100 other days. A woman in a sharp gray business suit had come to my small rented office earlier that week. She barely sat down before opening her purse and sliding over a clean white envelope. Inside, a few blurry photos of a man, her husband, mid-40s, dark hair graying at the sides. She spoke calmly, like she'd practiced it. "He's been staying late after work. Says it's negotiations. I just want to know the truth." I said sure. That's what I do. He drove a silver Lexus, clean and a bit too polished for daily commutes. I followed him in my own beat-up Honda, keeping a careful distance. I like to use my old Nikon, film, not digital, because it made me slow down, stay focused. For the first few days, it was boring. Real boring. Office building, coffee shops, once a stop at a hardware store. Every evening he went home like clockwork. I figured maybe he was actually just working late, and the client was spinning herself up for nothing. By Friday, I was about ready to wrap it up with a polite report and a padded invoice. But that night, he didn't go straight home. I watched from a parking lot across the street as he pulled into a cheap-looking hotel with a flickering neon sign, Sunset Inn. I felt my shoulders tighten. I let a couple minutes pass before easing the Honda closer. He wasn't alone. A woman got out from the passenger side. Young, long dark hair, leather jacket, tight jeans. They walked close together toward the lobby entrance. Not quite hand in hand, but close enough. I parked a little ways down and grabbed the Nikon. I didn't need to get fancy. A couple of fast shots, him with his arm around her waist, laughing low, her leaning into him like she belonged there. The lens clicked quietly. I stayed long enough to see them disappear inside. Didn't bother trying to follow. No need. The pictures would say enough. Back in the car, I slid the camera into the glove box and took a long breath. Easy job. Done and dusted. Maybe 30 minutes more of writing up the file and sending it off. I pulled out into the street, taking it easy, heading for the main road. I wasn't in a rush. At the first red light, I noticed it. Just a flash at first. The way the silver paint caught the overhead street lamp. I saw his Lexus, still parked by the hotel, but there, behind me, a few car lengths back, another silver Lexus. Same model, same shine. I shook it off. Probably not even the same car. Silver's a popular color. I made the next right, then a left down a side street lined with dark warehouses and closed shops. Quiet. Empty. The Lexus followed. My palms went a little sweaty on the steering wheel. I told myself I was being stupid. I'd been doing this too long to get spooked by coincidence. Still, I made a fast right into an even narrower side street, one I knew dead-ended behind an old garage. The Honda's tires crunched on broken glass and gravel. The Lexus kept going straight, didn't even slow down. I let out a small breath, telling myself again that it was nothing. Just long, weak nerves. I looped back toward downtown, keeping an eye on the mirrors just in case. No sign of him. Probably back in the hotel room, with other things on his mind. By the time I got back to my little apartment, it was after midnight. I dumped the Nikon on the kitchen counter and peeled off my jacket. I didn't even take my shoes off, just dropped into the cracked leather chair by the window. I popped the camera open and slid out the memory card, ready to scan through the shots before calling it a night. The pictures came up on my old laptop screen, a little grainy from the low light, but clear enough. Him smiling, her laughing, the two of them pressed close under the cheap neon buzz. A perfect set for the client. Easy payday. I was flipping through, adjusting the focus here and there, when I noticed something off. In one of the wider shots, just at the edge of the frame, past the couple's shadow, there was a shape. A figure. Standing by the curb across the street. Blurred and dark, almost hidden by the neon glow. I squinted, leaned in close to the screen. It wasn't some random passerby. Whoever it was had been standing still, facing me, watching. I turned the lens back in my hand, twisting it slowly, running through the rest of the frames. But I didn't see the figure again. Must have moved on. Or maybe I hadn't noticed them move at all. Either way, the hair at the back of my neck stayed standing up. I told myself it was nothing. Just some drunk, some random guy waiting for a ride. Happens all the time around places like that. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I should have seen him before. Or that maybe he was still there when I turned my back. I closed the laptop with a hard snap and stood up, moving to the window without even thinking. The street below was empty. Just the dull yellow lights, the long cracked pavement, the occasional whisper of wind kicking a loose paper bag across the sidewalk. No cars, no footsteps, no watchers. Nothing. Still, I double-locked the door and pulled the blinds closed tight. Better safe than sorry. I didn't sleep much that night. I kept twisting the camera lens in my hand over and over, not really thinking, just feeling the rough edges click between my fingers. I was parked in the same empty warehouse lot, copying the photos to my laptop. The sound of footsteps behind me was faint at first, but they grew louder as they got closer. I turned around slowly, barely able to breathe. He was standing there, just outside the shadow of the building. The man from the hotel, the one I'd followed for days. He had the same cold expression, and in his hand, he held a gun, the barrel gleaming under the dull streetlights. "How much did they pay you?" he asked quietly, his voice almost calm. The words hit me like a punch. I didn't know what to say, but I knew there wasn't much point in trying to explain myself. I lifted my hands, slowly, trembling. I didn't want to make any sudden moves. I handed over the Nikon, the memory cards, everything I had. I couldn't stop the cold sweat from running down my back or the pounding of my heart. I felt like I was about to choke on the panic. He didn't say anything else. He just took the camera and cards from me, his eyes locked on mine the whole time. Without another word, he turned and disappeared into the night, his footsteps echoing off the concrete. I stood there, frozen, trying to make sense of what had just happened. My body didn't want to move, but my mind couldn't stop racing. He had taken everything, the photos, the evidence, the job I was supposed to finish. I could barely hear the hum of the Lexus as it pulled away, disappearing into the darkness. It was over. I managed to drive home, numb, just trying to keep my hands steady on the wheel. What the hell had just happened? I couldn't process it. I had no answers, no way to explain why things had gone so wrong. When I got back to my apartment, I couldn't bring myself to touch the phone, couldn't even look at the computer. But something nagged at me, a flicker of thought, a brief moment of clarity. I had to go back to the car. I couldn't believe I didn't check sooner. In the trunk, hidden underneath a few loose papers and receipts, was a small flash drive. The backup. I don't know why I didn't think to check it earlier. Maybe I'd been too stunned, or maybe I just wanted to avoid dealing with the mess. Either way, I had it now. I held it in my hand, staring at it, my fingers trembling as I plugged it into the laptop. The photos I'd taken were all there, every shot, every angle. It was a backup, but it was my lifeline now. I thought about everything I could have lost. The client's husband had made sure I didn't have anything on me, except this, the flash drive. I let out a long breath and wiped my face with both hands. At least I was still alive. I called the client the next morning. She didn't take it well. "I'm sorry," I said. "I've lost the camera, and I couldn't retrieve the files. I'm giving you back the advance, though." She didn't say anything for a long time. When she did speak, her voice was cold. "You're a professional, and you failed. That's not something I'll forgive." She hung up before I could say another word. I was left with the silence of my office, a stack of old case files, and a deep sense of failure. It was over. I knew that now. But I had the backup. A week later, I took the flash drive to a lawyer I knew. Someone who could handle the legal side if things went south. I didn't know if I'd need it, but I wasn't taking any chances. He looked at the files, the photos, and then back at me, his expression unreadable. "Better safe than sorry," he muttered, sliding the drive into his desk drawer. I left his office, feeling the weight of the decision I had made. It was one thing to take photos, but this was something else. This was bigger than me. bigger than the money. I knew I had to change. I couldn't keep running the same business, same office, same way. A few days later, I moved everything, office included. The new place was a little smaller, but it felt safer, at least for now. I put cameras in the car. I started being more careful about contracts. I triple-checked everything. Every move I made felt like it was under a microscope. I couldn't afford to screw up again. One evening, after closing up the office, I was alone in the car, heading home, when I found something tucked under the seat. A crumpled note. I didn't have to unfold it all the way to read the message scrawled on it in a rushed hand. Чужие тайны убивают. Other people's secrets kill. I shoved the note back under the seat, my stomach churning. I didn't want to think about it, didn't want to know what it meant, but it stuck with me. Some nights, I still see the flash of the camera's lens, the burst of light, like a gunshot. I can hear the click of the shutter, the sound of the Lexus's engine growling behind me. I never got a chance to ask why. Why me? Why the photos? But I know now that some truths are better left alone. The things you think are just business, just a job, can turn deadly. For one person, the evidence on that flash drive was a ticket to freedom. For someone else, it was a sentence, and I had almost paid the price for it. Some truths are dangerous. Some things are better left in the dark.